Vinland Saga is a Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Makoto Yukimura. The series is set in a historical depiction of Europe during the Viking times, and it focuses on a boy named Thorfinn. Now, Thorfinn's character arc is quite expansive and introspective, and at its best, Vinland Saga explores characters' motivations with great detail and depth. I mean, to fully witness the metamorphosis that goes on with Thorfinn throughout the series is truly breathtaking. It's one of the best character arcs that I've seen in a manga, and it's really a joy to read. Not only that, you got exciting battles, heartbreak and turmoil, and just a very exciting atmosphere. And I think Yukimura is really at his best when he takes the historical elements of that time period and implements it seamlessly into the manga itself. Now, as of yesterday, July 25th of 2025, the manga has officially ended. A story that is 20 years in the making has finally reached its closure. And although it's a very happy moment, it's also a very sad moment as well. I know a lot of us got invested in the story and the characters, and to see it go away like this it's somber in a way. But I think a lot of you will agree that it's fantastic that we got an ending, and it's very consistent and strong with the beginning and middle parts of the story. Yukimura's quality of writing stayed consistent throughout, and in fact, you might even argue that it got better towards the end. But anyway, I'll let you be the judge of that. And with that, let's start our epic journey into the story of Vinland Saga. 11th century AD, Frank Kingdom territory. A massive battle is taking place with many casualties. A man named Askeladd wants to burst open the gates and take all the treasures for himself. Now, if Thorfinn can bring back the general's head, Askeladd will grant him his wish. After a successful negotiation, Thorfinn signals Askeladd to proceed with his plan. Some of the enemy forces then notice a dragon traveling across the mountains in the nighttime. The battle picks up once again the next day, with Thorfinn poised to enter the action. Just then, Askeladd's men burst onto the scene while carrying their ship on their shoulders. And just in case you're wondering, there is actually historical evidence that said that Vikings did carry their ships. Now, I doubt that they ran with the ships on their shoulders like they're doing now, but they did carry them from one body of water to the next, so that's pretty damn impressive. And a very nice insight by the mangaka. They plunge the ship into the moat and start rowing at top speed. Thorfinn leaps across the moat and scales the wall to confront the enemy. He slices off the head of the captain and leaps into the moat to retrieve it. The offensive army breaks through the gate, only to find out that all the soldiers are already dead. Now, all the treasure was plundered before the offensive army could take it. And with this, they take a look over at Askeladd as he says, "As one half of the spoils of war, I present to you the victory. And we shall be taking the treasures. No complaints, I assume," says Askeladd. Thorfinn boards the ship and presents the enemy commander's head. He then demands a duel with Askeladd, but it will have to wait until they reach safety from the Franks. Now, though they were known by many names, this is a story about Vikings appearing in many lands to plunder what they pleased. The Vikings then go to Denmark to unpack their various treasures. After settling in for a bit, the scheduled duel between Askeladd and Thorfinn is ready to take place. While Askeladd reminisces about the past, Thorfinn lunges forward with absolute ferocity. Thorfinn knocks the sword out of his hand, but Askeladd's swift movements forces Thorfinn to break up. Askeladd provokes Thorfinn by calling his dad a fool. Thorfinn charges forward, yet Askeladd easily subdues him with a quick move. He dislocates Thorfinn's shoulder and tells Bjorn to fix him back up. While sulking after his loss, Thorfinn is visited by a vision of his father. Thorfinn's father, says that he must discover what a warrior truly is. A slave girl then tells Thorfinn that it would be great if there was a land without wars and slaves. A land of peace, as it were. And with this, we are transported back 10 years in the past, to a small village in Iceland. Leif Erikson tells Thorfinn about a place called Vinland. "I called it Vinland, the land of pastures," says Leif Erikson. It is the year 1002 AD, in a village in Iceland. Thorfinn marvels at the headdress from the natives, as Thors comes inside. Afterwards, Leif tells Thors that they are freezing in Greenland, due to a recent cold snap. The next day, Ylva finds a man frozen in the snow. Thors brings him inside and notices that his body has been whipped quite extensively. Leif tells Thorfinn that King Harald of Norway ruled over with an iron fist. So many people decide to leave their homes to come to Iceland. The slave then tells Thors that he escaped from Halfdan's lands, and he doesn't want to go back. Just then, Halfdan arrives in the village to reclaim his property. Halfdan makes it clear that he's not playing around, as he displays his chains for all to see. He then rips away one of his men's swords who is bickering with a man from the village. He then tears his face to shreds and demands his slave back. Thors offers Halfdan 3 sheep for the man to buy his freedom. However, he eventually agrees to pay him 8 sheep as Halfdan takes his leave. Thor buries the now deceased man, as Thorfinn wonders where they could escape to avoid all this bloodshed. In a village in northern England, an invasion of a Viking village takes place on Bath Day. A warship then arrives at Thorfinn's village as he alerts his father. Now these are warriors of Yam, and they are led by Floki. Floki informs Thor about the attack on the Danes, and how the king's sister was among the dead. The Yam Vikings are set to assist the Danes, and since Thor used to be a Yam Viking, he must offer up his life once more. Yam Viking Captain, Thor's the Troll. You will be joining us in this battle, says Floki. Afterwards, Floki informs the villagers that Thor is coming with them, and if anyone else wants to heed the call to battle, they should join him as well. Now the villagers are thrilled with this notion, but Thor is anything but thrilled. In fact, he looks a little disheartened. Elsewhere, Thorfinn acts overly aggressive with children while playing war. Thor then hears that Thorfinn was being rough with the other kids. Tired of playing with pretend weapons, Thorfinn rummages through his father's belongings until he finds real weapons. Thor is not so pleased about this, asking what he's going to do with it. He then reminds Thorfinn that he has no enemies, as there is no one in the world that he needs to hurt. Thorfinn then calls him a hypocrite as he runs off. The next day, the men prepare to set off, as Thor looks for Thorfinn. They row away from the coast and hoist the sails. Shortly afterwards, Thorfinn pops up from one of the barrels to his father's surprise. On Faroe Island, Floki meets up with Askeladd. Now the Yam Viking has a simple request for Askeladd, to kill Thor's. The two exchange a few biting words before a spear comes flying in. The spear was quote-unquote accidentally thrown into the room by Bjorn. Askeladd then accepts the job as he sees himself out. We then see that Bjorn's spear killed one of the Yam Vikings that was listening into the conversation. Now Thor's first child, Ylva, was born while he was still with the Yam Vikings. Now after her birth, that's when he became afraid of the battlefield and decided to run off. In the now, Thor's crew reaches Faroe Islands, a place in the middle of Iceland and England. While traveling through a narrow pass, an ambush is carried out by Askeladd's crew. Thor protects his son as the inlet is now completely blocked. Askeladd and his crew ride in on 2 warships to block the escape. Thor gives Thorfinn a blade and tells him to only use it to protect himself. Bjorn ingests an Amanita muscaria mushroom to help him go into a berserker rage. Thor jumps onto the boat and takes down many of Askeladd's men. The effects of the mushroom manifest themselves, as Bjorn has entered a frenzied state. He makes his way towards Thor's, but the Troll of Yam calmly punches him in the face. He then proceeds to knock him out with an uppercut. Askeladd's men look to take the crew alive to sell him on the black market, but Thor comes in with the intensity of a lion. With their strength cut in half, Thor commands them to leave at once. Realizing that the men won't back down, Thor demands a duel with Askeladd. Askeladd agrees to entertain the Troll of Yam, as he jumps onto the boat and pulls out his sword. Thor closes the gap, as Askeladd cuts a rope that releases the sail. He then darts under the sail and slashes Thor across the chest, but it's not deep enough to kill him. Realizing that he's fighting a strong foe, Thor cannot spare the brunt of his might. Thor seizes the initiative as Askeladd does his best to defend. Askeladd manages to fight back, and even breaks Thor's sword with his armor. Askeladd goes in for the big swing, but Thor punches his arm, causing him to drop his sword. Now the battle is over and it's clear that Thor is the winner, but Askeladd can't surrender, so he tells Thor to kill him. Thor tells Askeladd that a true warrior needs no blade. Askeladd then asks Thor to be their leader. After hearing this, Bjorn rages out. He then proceeds to jump across the boat and threatens Thorfinn with his blade. Thor puts the blade to Askeladd's neck and says that he has broken the terms of the duel. But Askeladd, being a man that's only in it for the money, is only after Thor's life. He doesn't really care about the rest. Askeladd then declares him the winner, as he gives the command to fill Thor's with arrows. Now Askeladd vows to withdraw his men immediately since Thor's won the duel. Thorfinn is released as he immediately hugs his father. One of Thor's men attacks Askeladd, as Askeladd tells him to respect Thor's sacrifice. And with this, Thor passes away, while Thorfinn hugs onto him whilst crying. Sometime later, Thorfinn, who's been hiding in the boat, threatens to kill Askeladd. And he's just got an absolute look of rage and fury on his face as well. When asked what he believed in, a Viking once answered, "I believe in my own strength and nothing else." The Viking invasions intensified as they pillaged England and set their sights on the throne. It is now 1008 AD in eastern England, and Thorfinn is taken in by a family. They proceed to feed him and give him a bath. An English warrior then comes in looking for a village spy, as Thorfinn discreetly takes out his knife. The old woman lies to the soldier to protect Thorfinn. Later on, Thorfinn grabs a stick with fire on the other end and commands the two of them to run away. Thorfinn lights one of the houses on fire, as this is the signal for Askeladd's men. Thorfinn proceeds to slaughter the English soldiers as he tells the two women to run away. Askeladd's crew makes landfall, as the man himself congratulates Thorfinn on a job well done. The Viking Age was in a time of prosperity, as King Sven would take England for himself 5 years later. They pillaged the lands of Murica until finally attacking the center of power, Wessex. However, their march ended when they reached the trading city of London. Now Askeladd wants plenty of riches, and if he wants to attain them, it all starts here in this battle in London. He then commands Thorfinn to bring him Thorkel's head. If he does this, Askeladd will grant his wish, and oblige him with another duel. A Viking ship proceeds forward, as Thorkel comes out to greet Floki. Floki offers him double what the English are paying, but Thorkel is more interested in fighting strong warriors like the Vikings, since the English are so weak. He then gives them a parting gift before they hastily escape. The siege continues as Thorkel makes light work of them. Thorfinn then leaps off the ship to have a go at Thorkel himself. Thorfinn effectively dodges the main swing, and looks poised to take Thorkel's head. "Now, let's see what you got, little one," says Thorkel. Thorfinn's swiftness allows him to evade Thorkel's attack, and he even manages to cut him on the wrist. Because of Thorkel's immense stature, Thorfinn has trouble reaching his vital spots. He then drives his dagger into Thorkel's hand, but the tall man uses this opportunity to whip the boy around like a rag doll. Now Thorkel realizes that the battle is already over, as Thorfinn uses this opportunity to slice off some of his fingers. Thorfinn then tells him that he's the son of Thor's, and it seems like the tall man knows who his father was. Now after Thorfinn jumps into the water, Thorkel tells him that he's looking forward to their next battle, to settle the score. Elsewhere, King Sven wants Canute, his son, to gain some experience on the battlefield. Ragnar, who is second in command for the siege, will be in charge of advising Canute. Thorfinn exits the water, realizing that Thorkel injured him quite thoroughly. After resetting his shoulder, Thorfinn wonders why the Vikings find this constant battling so enjoyable. In a dream sequence, Thor instructs his son to forget about revenge. After waking up, Askeladd's men look to rape a woman as Thorfinn stares blankly before walking off. Thorfinn looks across the vast country lands of England and acknowledges that it's rich and full of potential, unlike Iceland, which is quite barren. Askeladd then drops in. Thorfinn reminds him that he'll continue doing his bidding until the day that he slits his throat. Askeladd reminds the boy that all strength eventually withers away, and according to their beliefs, God will kill every man on Earth in an event known as Ragnarok. So at the end of the day, all their fighting is going to be for naught. Word then comes in that Thorkel's men are pursuing the main army, which seems kind of insane. But that being said, they've already captured Prince Canute and they're keeping him prisoner. Askeladd, surprisingly, slices the messenger's neck and discloses his plan of taking Prince Canute hostage and holding him for ransom to the highest bidder, which all his men are thrilled to hear about. While traveling through the forest, Thorkel mockingly asks Canute who is stronger, Jesus or Aesir. Now Thorkel believes that an honorable death on the battlefield will bring about bliss in the afterlife, in a place known as Valhalla. Ragnar's men then claim to have Thorkel's forces surrounded, as they command him to release Ragnar and Prince Canute. Shockingly, Thorkel does exactly that, but he wants them to demonstrate their worth by fighting him in battle. And with this, the two opposing forces go at each other. Thorkel stops in the midst of his killing spree when he notices that charcoal smoke is off in the distance, and it seems like Askeladd's mysterious plan has gone into effect. Back in Iceland, Ylva receives news that Thors is dead, and that Thorfinn could not be found anywhere. Surprisingly though, Ylva seems unfazed by this, and redirects her efforts on compensating for her father's workload. She even manages to capture a whale, to the surprise of the other villagers. Now, despite working non-stop with no change in her attitude, it's clear that the loss of her father has taken an emotional toll on her. The fire spreads like crazy as the situation becomes increasingly chaotic. Because they wouldn't burn the forest to save the prince, Thorkel determines that a third party is involved in this fight. Askeladd's men douse Thorfinn in water and instruct him to capture Prince Canute. Thorfinn finds Canute quickly and informs him that he's here to rescue him. Thorkel emerges from the smoke, thrilled to cross paths with Thorfinn once again. Now it turns out that Thors was the only man in the world that was stronger than Thorkel, a true warrior as it were. With the fires raging on, it's going to be a race to King Sven's main force, and whoever gets there first wins. Thorfinn brings Canute to Askeladd as the latter bows down in the prince's presence. But upon seeing Canute's face, Askeladd wonders if he's a boy or a girl. Askeladd delivers a letter to an old man and tells him to deliver it to any person of authority, and it's very urgent. Ymir determines that Thorkel's group is only 1 day behind them, which means they gotta be moving at a faster pace. Askeladd requested reinforcements, so they'll have to stay on the move until they arrive. They continue their arduous march with little sleep, since they can't afford to give Thorkel any more ground. Askeladd then meets up with Legitus, as this was his contact that's going to help them out. And since they were able to cross the water, Thorkel's band is going to have to go back to Bristol so that they can cross the water themselves. Now this is the current situation with Askeladd's men in Wales and Thorkel's men needing to head south towards Bristol. Askeladd wants to walk all the way through Wales to keep Thorkel off of their back. To keep Prince Canute safe, Thorfinn will act as his bodyguard, and sure enough, if Thorfinn fulfills his duty, Askeladd will reward him with a duel. On their expedition through Wales, the priest states that love is the only thing that gives everything in life value. The group eventually encounters a couple of envoys from Breckennoig. Unfortunately, it looks like the situation is an ambush. The concealed men fill Askeladd's horse with arrows. Now Askeladd wants to put the Breckennoig people in their place by having Canute publicly scold them, but the prince is far too scared to do anything about it. Ragnar says that they know nothing of his upbringing, and that he's taken special care not to draw any attention to himself. Upon seeing Canute's cowardice, Thorfinn wonders if he's really the same age as him. We then find out that Askeladd is half Welsh and half Dane, and he's the descendant of Lord Artorius. And Artorius is the man who would later become the basis for the legend of King Arthur, which means that royal blood goes through Askeladd's veins. Now if things go as planned, Askeladd will become the vassal for Prince Canute, second in line for the throne. And if Canute manages to take the throne from his father, then Askeladd can control the affairs of all the Denmark people from behind the scenes. Now even though Askeladd is half Danish, he claims that he hates the Danish people, and he will work to benefit Wales. After marching once again, Ragnar believes that Askeladd is quite confounding, since he's using the Danes to help out the Welsh. Thorfinn continues to chide Canute until Prince Canute flies off of the handle with rage. Now in their travels, it starts to snow, which is going to slow down their travel pace. While drinking, the priest thinks to himself that a true warrior doesn't need a sword. It is now 10:13 in the middle of England, and it's a full-on blizzard. Unfortunately, Askeladd's decision to take a shortcut has backfired in the worst way possible. Running low on supplies, Askeladd's men do what they do best, and start pillaging a nearby village. Give me all food. Kill you. Since the villagers might alert the enemy to Askeladd's location, they have to kill them all right here and right now. Floki then alerts King Sven that Canute is not dead, but he has gone missing. The king bemoans his son's lack of talent, and says it's the very reason why he went missing in the first place. Canute, Ragnar, and the priest bury a person who died in the snow and pray at his grave. The priest then begins to doubt the father's love, but Canute scolds him for such preposterous behavior. There is no father who does not love his son, says Canute. Upon hearing this, even Thorfinn is taken aback, thinking about his own father. Thorkel's group then hears a story about the village that was slaughtered, which means that they can finally close the distance on Askeladd's group. The situation for Askeladd's men has become dire, as their location has been discovered by Thorkel's men. Thorfinn catches a rabbit, and when he returns inside, he surprisingly sees Prince Canute cooking up a stew. Now Canute has quite a talent for cooking, but his father said that it was the work of a lowly slave. News then comes in that the English have discovered their location, as Ragnar angrily makes his way towards Askeladd to scold him. Unfortunately for Ragnar, this was a trap to kill him, so that Askeladd could manipulate Canute from here on out. Despite this betrayal, Askeladd swears to Ragnar that he'll protect His Majesty Prince Canute. Ragnar informs Askeladd that King Sven intended for Canute to die in battle, and so he is Canute's true enemy. And with this, Ragnar collapses in the snow and draws his last breath. Canute is flabbergasted that Ragnar has passed away so suddenly. Askeladd tells Bjorn that getting rid of Ragnar was necessary in stimulating Canute's growth. The hope is to make him into a worthwhile leader, a leader worth following. Word then comes in that the English are performing a night assault on the Danes. And sure enough, Thorkel's the one leading the charge, as he instructs his men to leave Canute and Thorfinn for him. Askeladd subdues Prince Canute and commands his men to keep marching away from Thorkel's forces. It is now January 1014 AD in America, and Askeladd's men continue their tireless march. Amongst Askeladd's ranks, talk of betrayal begins to percolate. Askeladd's men take out a bridge, as Thorkel's group finally has them within their sights. Askeladd implores his men to keep their composure, but dissension amongst the ranks has already taken place. The opposing party wants Prince Canute, and for Askeladd to piss off peacefully. Askeladd then drops a bombshell on the Danish warriors. I hated every single last one of you. You're worth less than swine, you thick-headed Danes. Askeladd then slices off the heads of 2 Danes as he's not playing around anymore. Thorfinn tosses his knives at the Danes, As him, Canute and Bjorn escape via horse and sled. The Danes go after Bjorn's horse, as the 3 men inside go flying out. An injured Bjorn ingests an Amanita muscaria mushroom, as he's prepared to slaughter every last one of them. Thorfinn steals one of the horses and urges Askeladd not to die yet, since he wants to be the one that kills him so that he can avenge his father's death. In the past, Askeladd's mother instructed him to serve Lord Artorius. He is the true king, a true warrior. In the now, Askeladd fights off hordes of Danes, whom once called him leader. The tumultuous situation causes Askeladd to go in a frenzied state. Unfortunately, a barrage of arrows puts Askeladd to the ground, without a means for defending himself. Now, Askeladd put his life on the line because he couldn't wait any longer for a true king to return from Avalon. Thorkel's men then intervene, as Askeladd is pleased by this development. Thorkel determines that Askeladd is quite clever, so he decides to have everyone killed except for the former leader. Thorgrim attempts to plead for his life, but Thorkel says that he must accept the truth. And the truth is that he's a dead man. Thorkel's fervor for war puts Thorgrim in a catatonic state, in which he's completely unresponsive. It's actually quite embarrassing. Thorfinn storms onto the scene as Thorkel viciously punches his horse. Upon standing back up, Thorfinn screams, "Don't you dare do anything to Askeladd! He's my prey!" Thorkel, desiring an exciting fight, declines this request, forcing Thorfinn to a death battle. The fight starts off with both warriors flinging themselves into action. Now, if Thorfinn can give Thorkel a good battle, then the tall man will reveal more information about Thors. Canute then has a vision of Ragnar. Ragnar says that he failed him as an instructor and a mentor. It is now time for Canute to open his eyes and move away from the past into a brighter future. Upon waking up, Canute sees Bjorn fighting the various men who betrayed Askeladd. And with this, a change begins to happen within the prince. And on this day, the prince truly becomes a prince. Now, the English have completely slaughtered the Danes. Meanwhile, Thorfinn is giving Thorkel exactly what he wants, an entertaining battle. Thorkel questions Thorfinn on what it means to be a true warrior, as the boy can only think of the final moments he had with his father. The two go back and forth a little bit before Thorkel punts him into the air. The priest tells Canute that death completes man, because it's in death that he becomes one with the earth again. Though the earth, the wind, the mountains, and the tree can all contain love, it seems there are no signs of love in man's heart. We were banished from paradise, says Canute. While he says this, we see the English desecrating the Danes' bodies for their own pleasure. Bjorn continues his frenzied rage, as Prince Canute stands up to him with complete confidence. "Wretched warrior, you who are farthest from love, you were banished from paradise." Canute grabs onto the crazed man and decides to embrace him with a hug. Bjorn comes back to his senses, but is then attacked by one of the English warriors. Canute commands the two to become his vassals, and says he'll give their lives meaning. Meanwhile, Thorkel urges Thorfinn to get patched up, since his right arm is currently facing the wrong way. Askeladd decides to patch Thorfinn up, while Thorkel tells him the story of Thors. Now, it turns out that Thorfinn's grandfather was the chieftain of the Jan Vikings, and that makes Thorkel his great-uncle. When Thorkel heard that Thors died in battle, he ended up crying since he wanted to defeat him himself. Yet, this was all a ruse, as Thors decided to fake his own death. Now, he wanted the Jan Vikings to think that he was dead, so that he could escape with Helga and Ylva to a more peaceful place. Thorkel remains in disbelief, but Thors claims that he knows what it means to be a true warrior, and that's why he can't stay any longer. Now, Thorkel being Thorkel could not allow him to leave in such a fashion, so Thors decides to oblige him in one last duel. Thors easily subdues the tall man, and to boot, he does it all without a weapon, and by the time that Thorkel regained his consciousness, Thors was long gone. Despite being the son of Thors, Thorkel claims he doesn't have the same light in his eyes. Thorfinn flies into a rage, but Askeladd advises him to heed caution. If he doesn't do so, they probably won't get out of this mess alive. However, it seems he doesn't heed Askeladd's words, since he's back in the throes of battle once again. When Askeladd was younger, he witnessed a battle in which Thorkel fell to his knees, giving him an idea for Thorfinn's current predicament. Thorkel goes in to finish Thorfinn off, as Askeladd uses his sword to temporarily obscure the tall man's sight. This brief opportunity allows Thorfinn to land a critical strike, and to knock Thorkel onto the ground. Thorfinn then wraps his legs around his neck, and goes in for the kill. The chaos continues as Prince Canute walks in and instructs everyone to calm themselves down. "You shall not fight anymore. Those who die in this battle will have died a dog's death," says Canute. Thorkill admits his loss to Thorfinn, as his frustration gets the best of him. Thorkill admits that he's going to use the prince as bait to get some quick cash. Nevertheless, Canute is a worthless hostage, since his father harbors no love for him. To determine the veracity of this statement, Thorkill throws a punch straight in his face. Yet the prince doesn't flinch in the least. Thorkill stares directly in his eyes, and notices that it's the same eyes that Thor's had when he decided to leave the Jan Vikings. Now Thorkill wants to see how everything plays out with Canute. But if he does anything cowardly, then he'll kill him immediately. Upon hearing this, Askeladd can't help to let out a loud laugh. Askeladd admits to killing Ragnar, but promises that if Canute spares him, that he'll be of great use to him. Prince Canute allows him to stay alive, and says they'll drag King Sven out of his throne. Canute and his warriors reach the northeastern section of England, where the main army is stationed. While they settle in, Bjorn wonders how Askeladd's leg is doing, and he says it won't get in the way of him using his sword. Askeladd suggests to Canute that they should assassinate the king while they got the chance. To accomplish his goals, Canute will become a devil to create his desired utopia on Earth. Canute enters a building to greet his father, but Askeladd warns him that this could be an ambush. Canute, nevertheless, steps forward, as father and son unite with both of their lives on the line. King Sven commands the three to kneel in his presence. Canute informs his father that Ragnar died in America. He then tells Canute that he killed his own father and stole the crown from him. So we're seeing a very interesting parallel here. King Sven says the crown has got a mind of its own, and the one who wears it controls thousands of fleets. And now the king says that the crown does not desire Canute to be king, as he commands the archers to take their positions. Askeladd convinces the king otherwise, but the king insults him by suggesting that his father impregnated a lowly slave. Afterwards, Canute claims his father is a slave to the crown, but he will be able to control it. Thorfinn then bandages up his arm so that he can use his knife. Thorkill is then shocked to see the priest without a beard, especially given the fact that he looks so young. Canute wants the king out of the picture, but Askeladd says it's going to be quite tricky to pull off. Canute informs Ragnar's brother that Ragnar is dead, and that Canute is no longer looking for a safe haven anymore. He's grown up in a sense, and no longer needs to be coddled. Outside, we see Thorfinn practicing his swordsmanship with his bandage-up knife. Askeladd throws Atli some gold, and tells him to give up on fighting and to find a wife and have some kids. Now before Thorfinn gets his turn to battle Askeladd, Bjorn steps forward with his sword. Askeladd entertains the battle, but ends it swiftly by impaling Bjorn. He then tells him that he was his only friend. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Come, I'll play with you," says Askeladd to Thorfinn. Thorfinn notices that Askeladd is taking this fight completely seriously, something that he hasn't done in the past. Askeladd tosses his sword into the snow, and says that he could still defeat Thorfinn with nothing but his hands. Thorfinn musters up all his ferocity in the next strike, but Askeladd catches his arms with ease. "You still don't get it, do you? Why this keeps happening?" Askeladd pummels the boy, as Thorkill remarks that it's like Askeladd is predicting all of his movements. Askeladd looks to finish off Thorfinn, but Prince Canute intervenes. Now Askeladd hates the barbarous way that Vikings fight. Their emotional fervor inhibits their ability to think. He then tells Thorfinn that the first Viking that he killed was his own father. His father was a noble of Jutland, and he was the offspring of a slave woman. Now his mother was ill, but she often talked about the legend of Artorius. And according to legend, he would return one day to drive away the savages, to return the world to peace. However, Artorius was not coming to save her, so Askeladd had to take matters into his own hands. Askeladd's father subdued him and discovered the truth about the boy's lineage. This allowed him to slowly gain his father's trust, until the day that he finally murdered him in his sleep. He then encourages Thorfinn to use his brain in the future, as he picks up Bjorn's carcass. Though Canute wants Askeladd to rule, Askeladd says he's but a simple Viking. In the village of York, Leif searches out for Thorfinn. Prince Canute arrives in the village, mulling over possible ways that he could take out his father. An arrow is then shot at the boat, as Askeladd yells out that the prince has been shot. Thorfinn takes out the assailant, as Leif witnesses this all firsthand. Turns out the person that was shot was a female body double. Upon discovering Thorfinn's identity, Leif embraces him with a firm hug. Now Leif wants him to return home, but Thorfinn can't do that until he exacts his revenge on his father's murderer. Floki then informs King Sven that a plan to assassinate Prince Canute has backfired, thanks to Askeladd's clever planning. We later find out that Askeladd hired the assassin himself to spread the rumor that King Sven was attempting to kill his own son. Now Askeladd is aware that Gungnir is leaking information to the king,
But that's okay in his book, since they can control the information from which he hears. The next day, a banquet is held with the king and his sons attending. King Sven begins the proceedings by hugging Canute, and giving him Merka to rule over so that they can rule the lands together. Now King Sven felt slighted by Wales, so he wants to show them the extent of his might by attacking them in the springtime. This development caught Askeladd completely off guard. Askeladd then thinks of a way to save Wales from the might of the Danes, but it all seems hopeless. He's then called before the king, and given this opportunity, he decides to propose an alternative to the invasion of Wales.
Askeladd says that a war with Wales will incur heavy losses on both sides. Plus, the geography of Wales is very harsh, and won't be suited to feed the men very well. Askeladd believes he could persuade Wales into surrendering, which will save the Danes valuable manpower. "You are truly a loyal subject," replies the king. He then leans in and whispers, "Wales or Canute, choose." The king knows that Askeladd was born in Wales, so Askeladd says that he's a disgusting human being who is unfit to wear a crown. Askeladd draws his sword and warns everyone to stay back. He then reveals he's Lucius Artorius Castus, the legitimate king of Britain. He then slices off the king's head in one swipe. Canute is now indebted to Askeladd for his service, since he eliminated his threat to the throne. But now as the new leader, he has to order his men to capture Askeladd. Thorfinn peers into the banquet hall to see Askeladd in the midst of killing everyone. Thorfinn attempts to make his way in, as Askeladd slaughters without any mercy. To save Wales, Askeladd placed the whole burden onto himself. He then overwhelms Floki and commands him to bow down before him. "Don't come near Thorfinn!" yells Askeladd. Just then, Prince Canute drives his sword into Askeladd's abdomen. "Is this the first time you ever stabbed a man, Prince Canute?" "Well done," says Askeladd. Thorfinn catches Askeladd as everyone cheers on Canute. Askeladd instructs Thorfinn to kill him so that he can finally get his revenge. But Thorfinn cannot accept the circumstances of his death, since it was supposed to happen in the form of a duel. But with that being said, it's time for the boy to move on. He need not focus on revenge, for his battle is very far, far away from here. "Become a true warrior, son of Thors," says Askeladd. In a fit of rage, Thorfinn attacks Canute before getting taken down by Thorkel. Now Canute wants Thorfinn unharmed, as he places his father's crown on his head. He then takes control of the military in all of England, as he calls off the invasion of Wales. Meanwhile, Thorfinn is dragged off with a million thoughts racing through his head. Everything that happened in the last 10 years just floods his mind, as he's incapable of grasping what truly just happened. Elsewhere, a man named Einar, who is a slave, is transported via a ship. After several failed escapes from his captors, he's made an example of by some of his superiors. A man named Keitel ends up buying Einar for the price of 2 cows. Upon arriving on the farm, he's amazed by the vastness of the fields. Now his job is to clear out a forest to expand the farming fields, but he won't be doing that all by himself, as a boy named Thorfinn is going to be helping him out. And as it turns out, Thorfinn is also Keitel's slave. "Einar, Thorfinn, you two will be friends from this day forth. If the two can produce more money than they're worth, then they can buy back their freedom." Now, though Thorfinn has cleared out a good portion of the land, there's still far more to clear before they can plant the crops. Now, they receive some lunch from their superiors, but it's quite paltry. Thorfinn thanks them for their generosity, but Einar's not too happy about this. After a day of laborious work, Einar wants to tell Keitel about the situation with the guys that ate their lunch. But Thorfinn urges him not to stir up any trouble. Now, Einar wants to tell Keitel, but is thunderstruck when he sees a beautiful woman in Keitel's carriage. The next day, Einar is amazed that even Keitel is working hard amongst the other staff. Olmar, Keitel's second son, gets reprimanded by his father for cutting the crops too low. Now, Olmar detests the work in the fields, and says that he'll make his way in this world via the sword. Later on, Einar reveals to Thorfinn that Danes ravaged his village, and took everything away from him, including his sister. He therefore thinks of warriors as savage idiots. Now, Olmar wants to serve King Canute in the military, but the woman that he's sleeping with thinks it would be better off for him to inherit the farmland. He then assumes that she's after his father's fortune, as he storms off on his horse. He then wants to test his mettle with Fox and Badger, his father's bodyguards on the farm, but they easily subdue him. Now, killing a human being requires a lot of confidence, something Olmar doesn't quite possess yet. Thorfinn then wakes up from a terrible nightmare, as Einar wonders what's going on. Now, in the morning time, Einar chit-chats with Arnhind, and finds out that she's a slave as well. Fox then brings Thorfinn and Einar before Olmar, and tells them to die for the master's sake. Einar tackles Olmar and instructs Thorfinn to alert the master. Yet surprisingly, Thorfinn offers up his own life without any hesitation. Fox slashes Thorfinn across the chest with his blade, causing a small flesh wound. Now he wants Thorfinn to beg for his life, but Thorfinn remains unfazed and uninterested. I live to this day, and nothing good has ever come of it, says Thorfinn. Snake then intervenes and punches Fox in the face for his idiotic behavior. Now, Snake is the leader of the various bodyguards on the farm. He then draws his sword, eliciting a reaction from Thorfinn. Now, it turns out that Snake might be on the same level as Askeladd. Haha, you see, Thorfinn? Your body is saying that it wants to live, says Snake. Just what will I accomplish by living on, wonders Thorfinn. Later on, Einar asks Thorfinn if he's ever fought in a battlefield before. Thorfinn then admits to killing many people, something that angers Einar. At nighttime, Einar stands above Thorfinn with a clenched fist, but soon realizes that it wasn't his fault that his family died. Einar then wakes up Thorfinn from a nightmare, and said that he did so because they're friends and he wants to help him out. It is now 1014, and England has raised up an army to seize its country back from Canute. 1 year later, America has turned into a viable war zone filled with atrocities. America calls for a truce as Thorkel is pissed off that he wasn't able to take the enemy commander's head. Canute then looks over the bounty presented to him from the Earl of America. However, Canute finds this amount to be pretty paltry. Canute says that Ethelred, the previous king of England, is a coward for abandoning his country. He then shows Edric what will happen to America if he refuses to obey him. For the price of Ethelred's head, you can buy your peace. Is this not the wisest choice? Says Canute. Now soon afterwards, Ethelred died of quote-unquote sickness. And despite his son's efforts, Edmund also died of sickness later that year. And with all his rivals gone, Canute was crowned King of England in 1017. Edric was executed shortly afterwards for his betrayal of King Canute. Meanwhile, Einar and Thorfinn worked their butts off to remove one of the stumps. The two attempt to borrow a horse for their laborious work, but they have no luck. Now Thorfinn accepts this with no qualms, but Einar tells him to stop acting so dispirited. An old man working in the fields then offers to borrow them a horse. Now his name is Severker, and he wants them to help out with some of the chores so that they can earn the horse. Now with the horse, work will become much more manageable. They then find out that Severker is the great master, Keitel's father. Einar marvels at Keitel's 10 plows, saying that his old town could only afford one and it had to be shared between 8 families. Now Keitel wants his father to retire from the fields and to live with him, but Severker is resolute in working the fields. Severker then cooks up dinner, and he does this for himself, Snake, Thorfinn, and Einar. Now Snake remarks that the farm lacks in fighting force, and could easily be defeated by a unit of 50 to 60 soldiers. Now the reason that they're not attacked by others is because they pay tribute to King Harold, Canute's brother. And they do this twice a year. Now Severker believes that a big farm will only bring disaster, something that Keitel doesn't seem to understand. It is now October, and Thorfinn and Einar are seeding the fields. Southern Denmark, Keitel's farm in November of 1015. Einar shoots the breeze with Arnhind and swoons over her with glee. Unfortunately, Arnhind's superior slaps her in the face for not tending to breakfast. Thorfinn and Einar enjoy the progress of their field, making their dream of becoming free a very tangible reality. Thorgel returns from the battlefields to greet his father Keitel. Snake then catches some thieves that were stealing from the farm. Though Thorgel is part of an army, when a battle starts up, it's every man for himself. He then shows Omar a string of ears he collected from the English. Thorgel speaks glowingly of his dad, who was once referred to as Iron Fist Keitel. Now Keitel is unsure on how to handle the thief children, so Thorgel suggests that they chop off their arms. Now Keitel is terrified by his eldest son's brutality, and wonders how he should punish the children. Patil suggests that they work off the debt by being hired on as servants. Despite this arrangement, they still need to be punished. This will send a message to other thieves in the area to not take from Keitel's farm. Now Thorgel whacks the boy aggressively, so Keitel takes over to go a bit easier on him. Later on, Keitel admits that Iron Fist Keitel is a lie, and that he's in fact scared of his own son's brutality. Arnhind is the only person that he can confess this to, and he begs for her to stay by his side. In a nightmare, Thorfinn begs for forgiveness as he climbs up a jagged cliff. Upon waking up, Einar reveals that he was saying Askeladd and father in his sleep. While working the fields, Thorfinn admits that Askeladd was the man who killed his father. Ironically though, he doesn't hate Askeladd at this point in his life. And without this hatred, he feels empty. Severker teaches them how to fish, and says that emptiness is vital if one wants to be reborn. Einar later reminds him that humans can change, and that he's in the middle of a good change right now. Unfortunately, when the two return to their field, it's absolutely destroyed. Enraged by this, Einar wants to kill the ones responsible. Thorfinn urges him to stay calm, as revenge will only bring about nothing good. Nevertheless, Einar confronts the culprits. The culprits say that their wheat was inferior, as Thorfinn punches him in the face. Thorfinn gets blindsided as he begins to hear his father talking to him. While lying on the ground unconscious, Thorfinn dreams of Icelandic sheep. Despite winning the battle, Einar and Thorfinn will most certainly face punishment for this. Now Thors reminds Thorfinn that there is no human whom he must hurt, as he gets dragged into the abyss. He then descends to a place which he identifies as Valhalla, a deserted wasteland of corpses fighting non-stop. Now the scene depicts all sorts of depravity. He then notices Askeladd sitting on a nearby cliff. Now this is a garbage dump of constant war. No victory, no losses, and no end. While Thorfinn thinks about his warrior self, the corpses rise up to pull him in. And these are the corpses of all the people that he killed in his lifetime. "I'm sorry," pleads Thorfinn. Askeladd urges him to climb higher, escape this place, and become a real warrior. Thorfinn wakes up, discovering that he and Einar were beat up pretty badly. Upon picking up Einar, he vows to never hurt anyone ever again. And with this, he's parting with violence. Now Keitel is aware that the farmhands ruined Einar and Thorfinn's fields, so he won't punish them for the fight. Elsewhere, while in the fields, Severker urges Thorfinn to let the hoe do all the working. I mean, if that's not a double entendre, I don't know what is. It is now 10:18, and Prince Canute has made it to King Harald's domain, Jelling. The kids in the area play with the ball, but as Canute looks at the ball, he sees an image of his father's severed head. Now with Harald overseeing Denmark, Canute took over England. But right after Canute took over, Harald was routed by disease. Canute consoles his dying brother, but the figment of his father's imagination mocks him, saying that he poisoned his own brother for his own selfish ambition. And therein lies the curse of the crown. With power comes the craving for more power. Later on, Canute says that if two kings would have existed, that war would have been inevitable. So Harald's death was a necessity. Elsewhere, Thorfinn and Einar knock down the final tree in their section of the farm. Now it's been 3 years since they started on the farm, and the two of them are so close to buying their freedom back. Thorfinn then wonders if war and slavery could disappear from this world. Now Keitel gives them some good news, and says that they'll be free men once they're done planting the seed. Now, after they buy their freedom, he offers them a job on the farm. If they're interested, of course. And because Arnheim still lives on the farm, Einar considers this. Meanwhile, we see that Severker has fallen over in the fields from overworking himself. A slave owner begs for forgiveness, as the slave's rage is beyond comprehension. Now the owner will become a slave to spare his life, but the enraged man will not have it, as he decides to kill him. The former slave walks away from the burning house, intent on meeting someone. Arnheim then cooks up a meal for Severker and the others, since the old master is not well. Fox then tells Snake that a slave escaped from a farm about 3 days ago, and he's quite dangerous. Elsewhere, Canute trains with Wolf in a fierce sparring display. Canute's sister is quite unfamiliar with her brother's demeanor, considering that he used to be so much softer in the past. Canute then distracts Ulf and wins the match. Now in the face of securing revenue for the ever-expanding military, Canute has to consider higher taxes. Keitel then receives news that King Harald has passed away. Olmar gets in a fight with a man selling textiles. Well, to be precise, Olmar bumped into him and ruined his textiles. So the man with bug eyes wants some form of repayment. Keitel intervenes and reimburses the man for his materials. Leif Erikson then claims that quote-unquote Thorfinn is his adopted son, but everyone just calls him Bug Eyes. Keitel then mentions that there is a Thorfinn on his farm, as Leif begins to wonder if this is the real Thorfinn that he's been looking for. Keitel meets up with Canute and gives him with various goods from his farm. Canute is quite impressed with this, and wants to maintain a good relationship with Keitel, just like his father and older brother did. Olmar then requests to be enlisted in Canute's army. Now Canute wants to test him first, so he asks him to cut up a pig. But Olmar fails miserably. Though Olmar is a terrible fighter, Canute can mold and manipulate him to his own devices. And in fact, that's something that he wants to do in the very near future. Olmar is then mocked by other soldiers for having lost to a pig. Enraged by their mockery, he begins swinging his sword around in a wild fashion. However, he only embarrasses himself further with his pitiful display. Thorgel motivates his brother to become a man and kill the soldier who mocked him. A hooded man who's watching the fight then tosses a coin into one of the men's eye, allowing Olmar to secure the kill. Thorgel is impressed with his brother as he takes over from here and starts killing every man in sight. A guard then looks to arrest the three, but Thorgel slices off his head. They then find out that this was all a setup to jail Keitel and take his farm away from him. And the reason that Canute is doing this is because he didn't want to raise taxes, so to compensate for the money, he just decided to steal Keitel's farm and use that for the war funds. Canute now mobilizes 102 elite soldiers to head towards Keitel's farm. Now it turns out that Leif helped out Keitel in escaping, but he's not doing this out of the generosity of his heart, he just wants Thorfinn back. Elsewhere, the runaway slave sneaks up and ambushes the guards on Keitel's farm. Thorfinn then listens in to Snake reading the Bible for Severker. Now the escaped slave, Garder, rides by on his horse, as Arnheim calls out his name. "Arnis?" "My beloved wife, I found you at last!" Garter asks about Hjalti, but Arnhind conveys a subtle hint that he might not be okay. Snake warns Garter not to touch Arnhind as he cuts Garter's horse. Garter wonders if Snake is Keitel, and if so, he's gonna be a dead man. Einar wants to help out Garter, but Thorfinn warns him against killing someone. Although Garter is formidable, Snake manages to land a critical blow. Garter is then tied up as he cries out for Arnhind. Now Arnhind is visibly shaken by the incident, but Snake tells her to forget about him. Later on, Arnhind tells Thorfinn and Einar about how Garter left the village to participate in a war. Unfortunately, when the men were all gone, Vikings raided the village and took all the women and children. And because women who were not married fetched a higher price, they took away Arnhind's child away from her. But now she bears Master Keitel's child, and wants to protect him from Garter. Arnhind visits Snake and asks to see Garter since he's injured. Snake then takes off on a horse as Arnhind embraces her husband. Now Garter wants her to set him free, as he apologizes for leaving them to go to battle. Now the two have reached their allotted time with each other, but Garter bites onto one of the guard's neck. And with the guard down, Garter urges her to cut his ropes with the sword. Snake then returns to find 4 of his guards dead on the ground. And unfortunately, Garter has escaped. Snake then gives the order to capture Gardar, and to kill him on sight. Einar then talks with Thorfinn, and wonders if a world without slavery or war is actually a possibility. Now to Nords, refusing to fight is grounds to label you a coward, but Thorfinn is done participating in ceaseless wars. Thorfinn has killed many men, and now he wants to atone for all his murderous actions. And so he wants to find a place where no one needs a sword, a place where he can build a grave for all the spirits that he has killed. He then mentions a place far, far away from here that might hold the potential for being a safe haven. Now with word of Gardar's escape, Einar wants to help out Arnhind. Now Arnhind admits that she released Gardar, as Thorfinn sees that they're being spied on by the guards. Now Arnhind is keeping Gardar inside the Elder Master's house. Now Einar wants to help out Arnhind and get Thorfinn's support. Now Severkur offers up his fields to Snake if he's willing to give up his way with the sword. Now Einar conceals himself in a cloak and lures out the guards to his position. While chasing him, Snake suspects that something is off, as he makes his way back. Thorfinn then loads up Gardar in the carriage as Snake catches him by surprise. Snake pulls out his sword and is resolute in killing Gardar here and now. "My oh my, quite the predicament you're in, Thorfinn. You gonna fight or what?" questions Askeladd. With a little time to think, Thorfinn begins the fight with some swift moves. And after witnessing this, Severkur, Arnhind, and Snake are all surprised by his moves. Now Thorfinn, unarmed mind you, does well to dodge all of Snake's attacks. Unfortunately, Snake manages to slice him across the face. As payback for killing 5 of his men, Snake stabs the defenseless Gardar in the chest. Surprisingly though, Gardar leaps up and clenches on the Snake's neck. Arnhind then reminds Gardar about Hjalti, as he releases the now unconscious Snake to the ground. Unfortunately, with his wounds being so severe, he's gonna die pretty soon. But the notion of seeing his son has him in a state of bliss. As he's riding in the carriage with Arnhind, he collapses into her arms, promising that he'll never leave them again. Knut's men then make their way to Keitel's farm, as Keitel's crew has just made landfall. Thorgil informs them about the situation and instructs them to prepare for war. Now in this chaotic time period, the distraught Keitel begs for Arnhind to be by his side. Elsewhere, we see Thorfinn tied up at the guard's lodge on Keitel's farm. Thorfinn wonders if there was some other way of dealing with Snake that wouldn't have resulted in Gardar's death. Now Keitel finds out that Arnhind tried to escape with her husband, and because of this, it sends him into a rage. Now Snake refuses to let Leif see Thorfinn until he verifies this information with Keitel. Patil then requests that Leif buy 2 other slaves from the farm. Now when Master Keitel returns to Arnhind, he decides to whack her for her disobedience. She then announces that she's with child and that it's his, but he shows her little remorse and continues the beating. The ruthless beating continues on until Snake grabs the stick and urges him to stop. Now Keitel allows Leif to take Thorfinn and Einar, but Einar is his and his alone, and nothing will ever change that. Keitel will now punish the thieves that are attempting to steal his farm, i.e. King Canute. Einar is visibly shaken upon seeing Arnhind's current condition. Keitel instills a fervor in his men to rouse them up for the upcoming battle with Canute. Now Thorfinn wants Leif to leave before the battle breaks out, but he won't be doing that after how far he's come to save Thorfinn. Leif will wait for one day for Arnheim to regain consciousness, otherwise he's gotta get going. Meanwhile, the Jan Vikings start attacking as they move their way onto the beach. A messenger reports that Keitel will be sentenced with 10 years of outlawry, and will henceforth give his land to the king. However, because Keitel's men outnumber Canute's 3-1, he feels confident in taking down the king. Now Snake reveals that Keitel was mistaken with another man named Iron Fist Keitel, and so he's been living off of reputation all this time with no actual battle experience. Despite the odds, Snake owes a great debt to the farm, and must see this battle through to the very end. Thorgil wants to use the inexperienced farmers to distract Canute, so that he can ambush them. Keitel's forces attack the Jan Vikings, as Thorfinn's crew escapes with Arnheim. Arnheim dreams about Garder and her children, as she remembers that she's got to say goodbye to Thorfinn and Einar. And with this, Einar tells Bug Eyes to stop the carriage since Arnheim opened up her eyes. Meanwhile, the Jan Vikings slaughter the farmers with ease. Keitel's men are in shambles, as Thorgil swims behind the Jan Vikings with his eyes on Canute. Fox panics whilst the farmers get slaughtered one after another. Snake decapitates one of the Jan Vikings, and tells Fox to retreat with Badger, who got injured in the battle. Keitel is beginning to learn that Canute's strength is far mightier than his. And in this world, strength equals justice. Thorgil makes his move on Canute, but the king does well to defend himself. With his sword broken, he uses his cape to distract Thorgil and go for a new one. Thorgil denies this as he looks poised for the kill. Wolf intervenes at the last second, but ends up losing his eye in the process. Now because the men are starting to aid out King Canute, Thorgil is forced to escape. Arnheim wants to go to a place where no war and no slavery exist. She then thanks Einar and Thorfinn for being by her side and being so kind to her all this time. Keitel is quite battered from the battle, as Snake carries his body away in retreat. Now the baby that Arnheim was carrying is already dead, so the burden is too much for her to live on. She passes out as Thorfinn attempts CPR on her, but unfortunately it's already too late as she passes away to the other side. Thorfinn then tells her about Vinland and tells her to come with them, a place without war and a place without slavery. Snake arrives as Einar is hellbent on killing Keitel. Thorfinn begs for Einar to stop, but the rage-possessed man punches him out of the way. Thorfinn warns him about the curse of revenge as he knocks some sense into him. Thorfinn reminds him that they are brothers, and he doesn't want to see him suffer to the same curse that he suffered for over 10 years. Afterwards, a grave is then made for Arnheim as Leif reminds him that it's time to go. Thorfinn grabs onto Einar's hand and says they will create a new land together, a land of peace for Arnheim's sake. Canute wants the bloodshed to cease, yet the damage is already done at this point, and his father's severed head is the first one to remind him of this, as the piled corpses are being used to reach his paradise. Very similar to the way that Griffith piled up the corpses to his way to the kingdom. A nice little homage to Berserk by Yukimura. Really nice, I really like that. Snake informs him that the terms of surrender still remain unchanged. Thorgil, however, wants to use the 20 remaining men to take King Canute's head. With Master Keitel incapacitated, Olmar, the designated head of the farm, decides to surrender. Now he doesn't care about Thorgil's thoughts on the matter, so he welcomes the mocking. Thorgil can't bear the thought of being around so many cowards, so he decides to leave. Now in exchange for losing his farm, Keitel's son, Olmar, is finally becoming a man. Thorfinn, a previous bodyguard of Canute, then requires an audience with the king. They deny this at first, so Thorfinn wants to make a wager. And if he wins the wager, he can meet King Canute. And the bet is that he'll have to withstand 100 punches to the face. Thorfinn then takes blow after blow, as this is the path that he has chosen to live. Snake attempts to intervene, as Thorfinn goes flying back on the 32nd punch. Thorfinn stands up nonetheless, and calls out the Viking to finish the job. After enduring the 100 punches, the Vikings acknowledge Thorfinn as a true warrior. Thorfinn then emphasizes the point that he has no enemies. Wolf then grants him an audience with the king, a reunion that is years in the making. Thorfinn requests Canute that he withdraw his claims to Keitel's farm, but the king cannot do that. Einar calls out the king for his abhorrent actions, in setting up this battle with Omar serving as the stooge. Thorfinn wonders if Canute is still attempting to create a paradise in this world. Now Canute rules over large amounts of land, and commands thousands of ships, with tens of thousands of Vikings under his rule. Yet, to go against the natural flow of things is an insurrection against God. In short, it cannot be done. Thus, if he cannot save the Vikings abandoned by God, then a paradise cannot be built upon earth. What he's suggesting here is that he wants to go against God. He wants to go against the natural flow of things, which might be impossible and is an absolutely huge undertaking. Of course, this does not sit well with Einar, as he's sick and tired of being used as a pawn by the powerful elite. Now for Thorfinn to save Keitel's farm, the only option he'll have is to take down Canute by force. King Sven reminds his son that he is the herder, and he need not justify his actions to mere sheep. He thusly wants Canute to kill the disobedient sheep, i.e. Thorfinn. But Thorfinn says that he'll run away. Canute, obviously, is flabbergasted by what he just heard, to the point that he can do nothing more than laugh. Although he may be a fool, Canute acknowledges that Thorfinn is a gallant man. Thorfinn will thusly run away to a place where he can create his own state of doing things, a place without war or slavery. Later on, Thorgil is shocked to see that all of Canute's ships are gone. Now Canute is leaving Keitel's farm undisturbed, because he was impressed with Thorfinn's vision of attaining a paradise on Earth, and he doesn't want to increase Thorfinn's share of the work if he can help it. The next morning, Snake thanks Einar and Thorfinn for everything they did for the farm. Olmar thanks Thorfinn and says he wants to become like him someday. Now while Einar and Thorfinn are departing, Snake says that his name is Roald. And as they leave for the final time, we are left with one last shot of Arnhein's grave. Afterwards, Canute would reduce the size of his military and be accepted by the English people as a legitimate sovereign. Olmar henceforth took Keitel's place on the farm as the head person, and promptly compensated all the neighboring farmers who participated in the fruitless battle against Canute. It is now 1018, and Thorfinn has finally returned to his homeland of Iceland. It's been a while since Thorfinn has been here, and he even forgot how old he was. On land, Thorfinn joyfully looks to embrace his sister, but receives a foot to the face. Now Ylva has no recollection of her brother, but when his mother sees him for the first time, she remembers him straight away. "You look just like Thor's. You really are his son. Thor's had the exact same eyes as you," says his mother. Later on, Ylva finally acknowledges Thorfinn as her real brother, and gives him a swift punch for not visiting sooner. Halfdan, who we met very early on in the war arc, has gifted his son Sigurd with a sizable piece of land. They are now going to leave to greet Sigurd's new bride-to-be. While Ylva gives Thorfinn a haircut, she reminds him that it's time for him to settle down and have a family. Afterwards, Thorfinn is less than pleased with his new haircut. That night, Thorfinn summarized all the events that took place over the last 16 years of his life. "My sins are grave. I have to go to Vinland to build a land of peace," says Thorfinn. Now to accomplish this feat, he's going to have to accumulate a lot of money. And the only man capable of accommodating him is the ruthless Halfdan. Some time ago, a girl named Gudrid wanted to sail the seas with Leif Erikson. She was rather displeased with the notion of becoming a housewife, so she wanted to travel the world with him. In the now, Gudrid escapes Sigurd and scolds Leif for leaving her behind. Leif argues with her and says that men sail ships while women protect the home. In defiance, she cuts off her own hair and demands to be on the ship with them. She then proceeds to slip and hit her head, making her go unconscious as Sigurd wonders what's going on. Without even thinking, Sigurd starts attacking them with his chain. He deduced that they were the ones that cut off Gudrid's hair. Halfdan eventually intervenes to put a kibosh to the fighting. Now Leif is Gudrid's brother-in-law, since Gudrid married his younger brother, but he has since passed. Halfdan and Thorfinn get reacquainted with each other, as he invites them back to the house. Now since the wedding is not too far away, Gudrid is given a wig to wear since her hair is so short. Now while making their way to Halfdan, Sigurd half-heartedly apologizes for attacking Thorfinn. Turns out that Gudrid is not good housewife material, so it might be prudent to reconsider the marriage. But Halfdan only cares about securing blood alliances with Leif's family, and nothing else. A man who failed to repay his loans to Halfdan is then being punished with a chain. But since Halfdan's guests are here, he decides to spare the man for now. Thorfinn and his crew tell Halfdan about the plans to colonize Vinland, but Halfdan reminds him that Thorvald, Leif's brother, died to the natives there, something that Thorfinn was unaware of. Halfdan talks to Thorfinn privately and says that he can loan as much material as he's worth. Unfortunately, Thorfinn doesn't have anything to his name. Halfdan then suggests that he lick his boots for a loan, which surprisingly, Thorfinn is willing to do without a second's thought. Now it turns out that Halfdan merely suggested this in jest, as Thorfinn tells the others that the negotiations were a failure. Halfdan then gives them 24 narwhal horns, which can fetch a high price, though it requires a bit of work on their part. So in this manner, it's a test by Halfdan to see if he's actually serious about colonizing Vinland. When Gudrid was a girl, she would look forward to the times that Leif would come to visit and teach her about the vastness of the world. In the now, a woman named Hat says that she should have been Sigurd's legitimate wife. Now if Thorfinn's crew can transport these narwhal horns to Grickland, they'll fetch a high price. Unfortunately, the journey will be long and arduous. They'll be heading in the opposite direction of Vinland, but it's a necessary step in securing the funds to support their dream. Gudrid wants to participate in the adventure as well, but Leif says it's out of the question with her wedding the day after tomorrow. While they load up the ship, Thorfinn notices Gudrid hiding in one of the storage areas. She wants to prove herself to Leif, so she carries a huge bundle of ropes to impress him. Later on, she's officially married off to Sigurd in a grand ceremony. After that, Sigurd looks to consummate the marriage, but he gets stabbed in the thigh with a dagger. Till death do us part! He slaps her across the face as Gudrid escapes from the house and makes a run for it. Thorfinn's crew looks poised to leave as they notice Gudrid hiding in a barrel. She admits to stabbing Sigurd and bemoans the fact that she can't choose her own path in life. And it's all because of the fact that she was born a girl. You can choose, replies Thorfinn. The embarrassed Gudrid admits she wants to go with them on their adventure. Thyra gives Gudrid her belongings and tells her to take care of herself. And with this, they take off, as Gudrid apologizes to Thyra for not growing up to be a good girl. The enraged Sigurd blames Thorfinn for stealing his wife, as he's fully intent on chasing them down. Halfdan's wife reminds him that a woman has her own free will, as she checkmates him in a game of chess. At Shetlands, S-H-E-T, not the other way around, a village of people are brutalized by some Vikings. Thorfinn's crew stops at a village on Faroe Islands, staying with a family that Leif made good friends with. They eventually reach Shetland, as the first impressions look pretty grisly. Sigurd has trouble tracking down Thorfinn's location, but he will not allow himself, the son of the Iron Chain Halfdan, to be embarrassed by him. Thorfinn struggles to find any survivors in the village, until he locates a lone mother and child hiding in a cellar. Now, her wounds are too grave, and she's not going to last much longer, so she hands the child over to Thorfinn and tells him that the boy's name is Carly. After burying the mother, Thorfinn says they'll have to find a family that will take good care of the child. Now, while they struggle with the baby, Gudrid informs Thorfinn that only women who have just given birth can produce milk, something that he was completely unaware of at this point in his life. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. While taking care of Carly on the shoreline, Sigurd finally finds him and looks ready to exact his revenge. Now, Thorfinn tells Sigurd to stop making the baby cry, as Sigurd demands Thorfinn to return Gudrid to him. Thorfinn decides to lie to Sigurd and says that Gudrid passed away. "Gods, what did I do wrong?" exclaims Sigurd. And upon screaming this, he notices something off in the distance. That being Gudrid escaping with bug eyes. Ah, nothing like young love. Gudrid and Bug Eyes make it to the ship as Sigurd is furious that he was tricked so easily. Thorfinn's crew reaches the snow-covered fields of Norway, as Gudrid is impressed with the sights that she's seeing. They start setting up camp as a bear makes its way to their location. Thorfinn attempts to scare it back to the mountains, but the mother-trucking bear is not having any of it. Thorfinn soon finds himself in a deadly skirmish with the bear, as it takes a swipe at his chest. A woman then shoots a crossbow at the bear's back to completely neutralize it before it can cause any harm. The female hunter then reveals herself, and reveals that the bolts are strong enough to pierce the bones of a bear. They start to carve up the bear, as the female hunter identifies herself as Hild, daughter of Hrafanel. While eating the bear stew, Hild says that her family is all dead, and she's got no wealth to live off of. Now, 8 years ago, a band of mercenaries led by Askeladd pillaged and brutalized their village. And it just so happens that a boy wielding daggers in each hand slit her father's throat. And upon hearing this, Thorfinn is absolutely shocked. "The one who killed your father was me," says Thorfinn. Upon getting the confirmation that she was looking for, she pulls out her crossbow and looks to exact revenge. Einar tosses the food at Hild to distract her from shooting Thorfinn. Hild then reveals that she poisoned the soup, and if Thorfinn values his friends, he'll attempt to get the antidote from her. Thorfinn decides to handle the situation himself. Now, Hild is dead set on making him remember what he did to her. Now, even though Thorfinn did a terrible thing to Hild, he can't die right here and now, as he has a mission to see through to the end. Hild shoots a bolt at him as Thorfinn attempts to discern her position. Unfortunately for him, the crossbow was merely a trap to throw him off of the trail. Einar contemplates a method in which they can convince Hild that Thorfinn truly regrets what he did. While Thorfinn hides from Hild, he sees a vision of people he killed in the past. Sometime in the past, Hild helped out her father repair the saw in the town's village. Now, Hild's mother worried that she wasn't feminine enough, and didn't even know how to cook. But her father recognized her genius, and said she didn't need to conform to the conventions of a normal girl. Unfortunately, this is the night that Askeladd's crew attacked the village. While Hild and her father hid in the forest, he reminded her that a heart of forgiveness will lead to salvation. "You must be Hrafankel. Been looking for you," says Thorfinn. To defend himself and his daughter, Hrafnkel attacks Thorfinn with his sledgehammer. Thorfinn, however, is much too fast for the carpenter, landing a fatal blow in no time flat. Hild then questions Thorfinn as to why he killed her family, to which he responds with, "I'm the hunter and you're the hunted. That's all there is to it." Thorfinn then instructs her to run away before she gets raped. She hesitates for a moment, but then she clumsily makes her way through the forest before nearly falling to her death. She wakes days later, finding out that an old hunter bandaged her up. Not wanting to be prey any longer, she asks the hunter to teach her how to hunt. After much practice with the bow, she develops a proficiency with it. She then tries out a crossbow and realizes that she could take out even a bear with this. That being said, there's one problem to using the crossbow. She doesn't possess the necessary strength to reload it. But being a carpenter, she manages to design her own crossbow. While hunting an especially dangerous bear, Hild's master instructs her to relinquish her anger and resentment, as it will cloud her senses. Sometime later, the adult bear would get the best of Hild's master. To protect herself, she cocked her crossbow and aimed straight at the bear. Back in the present, Thorfinn identifies the weakness of the crossbow, that being the reload time. Therefore, Thorfinn plans to overwhelm Hild with his speed. That being said, Hild's unique design allows her to reload the bolts with relative ease, making Thorfinn's plan ineffectual. "Try dodging this," says Hild. After she puts several bolts in his legs, it seems Thorfinn has met his match. And to rub salt in the wound, she repeats the same thing that he said to her after he killed her family. Einar begs for Hild to spare Thorfinn's life, as we see the dead spirits once more clinging to Thorfinn's body. Gudrid, Einar, and even Karli explain that Thorfinn has changed his ways, and that he deserves mercy. Hild demands Thorfinn to bring back her family right now and right here. And if he can't do that, he'll have to compensate her with his death. "Please give me time. Time so that I can atone for my sins," pleads Thorfinn. Hild fires the crossbow, but the bolt goes flying in the air, thanks to her dad's interference. Both her dad and her old master want her to forgive Thorfinn, the one person who took everything away from her. Now Thorfinn will atone for his sins by building a land of peace. But if at any point he slips up, Hild will be there and she's going to put a bolt through his head. Later on, Einar reveals that Hild never poisoned the food, and that it was merely a bluff. Elsewhere, Thorkel is starving for a fight, so he breaks into a random family's house that is bickering with each other. Word then comes in that Canute wants Thorkel to remain where he is and maintain the peace, which means that the tall man has to endure more peaceful days without any fighting whatsoever. I mean, this is truly a punishment beyond words, one that makes him pass out. Thorfinn's crew then finds a family that is willing to take in Karli. However, Gudrid can't bear the thought of leaving Karli behind, so she runs back before they take off to bring him along with them. Now while they get back on track again, Bug Eyes reminds them that Sigurd is still hot on their trail. Speaking of which, Sigurd is currently in a fight for his life against some pirates on the Baltic Sea.
It's the beginning of the Baltic War, and Thorkel is preparing to fight a ferocious bear. The tall man cracks his knuckles as he remains fairly calm. Thorkel punches one of the bear's teeth out, and squeezes it unconscious with a bear hug. Floki arrives as Thorkel expresses his wish for war. We are now at the royal seat of Denmark, Jelling, April 1019. Leif Erikson instructs the group to trade sealskins for necessary supplies. We then see Sigurd and his group in bondage. Sigurd then happens to lock eyes with Gudrid. Thorfinn is then confronted by a man that recognizes him. "Thorkel's here right now at the castle," says the man. However, Thorfinn pretends not to know Thorkel. The man pulls out his sword to prove he is Thorfinn, but Hild shoots a bolt right through his arm. Thorfinn is then taken to Thorkel's encampment, as the tall man wastes no time in attacking him. Floki is shocked to find out that Thorfinn is the son of Thors, the troll of Yam. Floki recalls how he told Thors to withdraw from engagement with the enemy, but Thors would not capitulate. Floki states that the Yam Vikings are experiencing disorder, as the chieftain seat is currently vacant at the moment. Von covets the seat, and he and his supporters have left Jomsburg. Now, Floki can't take the seat because he's 50 years old, and at the age of 50, you have to retire. Therefore, he wants his 10-year-old grandson, Balder, to claim the seat. Thorkel recommends Thorfinn for the role as chieftain. Thorfinn, however, makes his intentions known that he has no interest in the seat. Thorfinn's crew leaves on their ships, as Floki sends 2 ships after him. Now, to get rid of their captors, Thorfinn wants to separate temporarily, so they only chase after him. Thorfinn and Hild exit the boat. with the plan of reconvening with the others in Odense. Gudrid is pissed that Thorfinn tries to shoulder everything on himself. Floki's men begin by destroying all the boats to prevent Thorfinn and Hild from escaping. Thorfinn then yells for the Jan Vikings to stop. He quickly finds himself surrounded, as he has no other choice but to fight. A soldier then throws a blade at him out of mercy. Thorfinn says that they are slow with the armor that they're wearing. He proceeds to knock them down as Hild provides assistance from the bushes. The commander urges the last two to attack, but they kill him instead. It turns out that these two are from the Van Battalion, and they're paying their respects to Thorfinn. They are Eskel and Vraj, and they want his help in destroying the villainous Floki. "I am just a traveling merchant. Don't try to get me involved," yells Thorfinn. After terrifying one of the villagers, Thorfinn realizes that he cannot live amongst the common folk. At Jomsburg, Floki hears about the failed assassination on Thorfinn's life. Floki then commends his grandson Baldur on his hard training. Baldur wants to show his grandfather his new fishing rod, as Garm throws a spear through one of the maids. Turns out that she was an assassin, as Floki doubles the number of guards to protect Baldur. Now, Sigurd has had enough of the forced labor, as Thorkel confronts him. After gushing over the tall man, Sigurd happily gets back to work. Ulf has been appointed to army overseer, as he hands Thorkel a letter from his highness. Eskel then takes Thorfinn to Van's garrison. "I am Van," says the leader. Van starts crying, realizing that Thorfinn is the son of Thors. He then reveals that Floki was behind the plot to murder Thors. By the testimony of a previous member of Askeladd's crew, Floki ordered Askeladd to kill Thors. "Come, Thorfinn, avenge your father's death," says Van. Thorfinn then goes to think by himself. Hild reminds him that if he avenges his father's death, she'll do the same, meaning he'll be dead. For a brief moment, Thorfinn was subsumed by rage. Despite his warrior spirit, Thorfinn wants to be a kinder person. The dog watches over Carly, hoping that he won't turn violent like the other humans. Thorfinn then meets with Atli from Askeladd's previous crew. Thorfinn implores him to find an honest means of work. Thorfinn then asks for Atli's release, but Van will only do so after the matter with Floki is settled. Thorfinn asks to be taken back to Funen, but Van says he'll be sailing to Jomsburg first thing tomorrow. Thorfinn, however, plans on changing this world through non-violent methods. Hild then discovers 10 girls that Van's group has been having their way with. Just then, the men prepare for battle as Thorkel's fleet is quickly arriving. "Van! Come out and play!" Baldur asks Floki who's after his life, as the two go fishing. The boy doesn't want to be chieftain, preferring fishing with his grandfather. Floki, however, is building a kingdom for Baldur to inherit. Thorfinn wants to use this distraction to make his escape. Sigurd begs for a sword so that he can fight alongside Thorkel. "Fight well, High Spirit. Meatheads like us are no good if we don't fight to our heart's content." One of the soldiers is looking for Thorfinn, but Van attacks him with his warhammer. The man dodges as it's revealed that it's Garm, and it turns out that he infiltrated their camp. Thorkel is tired of waiting, commanding them to make their move already. Thorkel then calls a temporary truce so that he could talk to Van. Thorfinn and Hild help the women escape Van's encampment. One of the girls has a family boat that they can borrow. There are some soldiers ahead, so Thorfinn wants to throw them off of the trail, while Hild helps the girls escape. Garm finds Thorfinn as he wants to offer him a gift. It turns out that it's Van's head. Meanwhile, Thorkel is furious that someone stole his prey. Before Garm can fully explain what happened, Thorfinn runs off. "Hey, why are you running away? Aren't you strong?" says Garm. Thorfinn doesn't want to fight, but Garm is giving him no choice. Garm then cuts him across the face with his spear. Thorfinn is quite taken aback by Garm's amazing skills. Thorfinn closes the distance to neutralize the spear, but Garm reveals a hidden blade within the spear. With this, Garm's got no blind spots. "Come at me then, let's have a serious battle," says Garm. "I refuse. Don't try and make this seem as if there are only two options." Thorfinn proceeds to run away again. Garm doesn't know what to make of this situation. He'll thusly need to press the right button to make Thorfinn want to fight him. Thorkel gives Van a funeral ship to send him off. He then switches sides and decides to focus his efforts on killing Floki. Sigurd then realizes that the funeral ship was his own. Garm gets excited, thinking about the impending war. Let's invite Thorfinn too. Meanwhile, Einar and the others are waiting for Thorfinn at Funen Island. A girl then asks if they're friends with Thorfinn. However, this was a trap laid by Garm. Bug Eyes then puts up a tough guy facade. And because of this, Garm wants to battle him. But Bug Eyes refuses, since he doesn't have his beloved sword. This is all a lie, by the way. Bug Eyes continues his diatribe as Garm gets impatient. When Garm bends down, Bug Eyes attempts to bash him in the head, but it's unsuccessful. Upon waking up, Bug Eyes finds out that the others are gone, as he now needs to warn Thorfinn. Now, a half a year ago, Canute was out on a deer hunt, but it turns out that the wolves beat him to the punch. He instructed the men to cull their numbers by killing the head wolf. Yeah, it turns out that he said this just in jest. Thorkel thinks it's strange that many important figures are dying of illnesses lately. He then grabs onto Ulf's neck. Don't get cocky thinking you can control me. I fight when I want to fight, and I die when I want to die. Thorkel wants Ulf sent back to Jelling, as he's excited for the upcoming battle. Garm returns to Jomsburg to show them Van's head. It turns out that Thorkel sent back all his war funds to Floki, and he did this because Garm stole his prey. Floki wants to hand over Garm to Thorkel since no one can defeat him. Nevertheless, Garm claims he can. However, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if they kill Thorkel, King Canute will become their enemy. So Floki decides to lock Garm up. Turns out his cell is peering directly at Einar's group. Gudrid wonders why Garm is after Thorfinn, but there's no particular reason. He just likes fighting strong dudes. We then see Thorfinn and Hild approaching Jomsburg. Now, Bug Eyes finds his time with Carly a bit daunting. Thorfinn and Hild return as they find out that the others were taken hostage. To save them, however, it's highly likely that Thorfinn will have to kill someone. Bug Eyes emphasizes the point that he wants his dad, Leif Erikson, to get home safely. I promise, says Thorfinn. Floki hears that Thorkel's forces are 500 troops and 13 ships. Floki wants Garm out of his cell. Sigurd begins practicing with his new chain, which impresses Thorkel. In fact, Thorkel wants to see it in action during the battle. Garm is then brought before Thorkel as a prisoner. The messenger reports that Floki wants to resolve the matter with a banquet. But Thorkel just wants to fight. After the messenger leaves, Thorkel decides to do battle with Garm. Meanwhile, Thorfinn begs for his friends to be safe. Floki is irate that Thorkel refused his deal. Balder then goes down to the jail cells to free Leif, Einar, and Gudrid. Turns out Balder feels guilty for the war to come. Meanwhile, Garm and Thorkel are both exhausted from their battle. Yet they continue to attack each other at blinding speeds. The fight is then declared a draw. Thorkel, thank you. That was incredible. Now, there's a grandfather that is looking forward to spending some time with his grandson. However, he's suddenly killed by a cannonball. And with this, the battle is in full swing. Leif's group looks to escape, disguised as soldiers. Balder wants Thorfinn to become the new chieftain, as opposed to himself. He then leads them to a well so that they can make their escape. Fire arrows start raining down on Jomsburg as Einar goes down the well. Gudrid then invites Balder to run away with them. A soldier then intervenes as Gudrid is confused for one of the maids. Leif, inside the well, calls out for Gudrid at the very worst time possible. Gudrid gets some water as she tells Leif to flee. The soldier throws a spear inside, but only hits the bucket. The Jomsburg Vikings roll a log onto the men from Thorkel's army. One of the Vikings tries to get the attention of one of his friends, but accidentally shoots him in the head. He then gets killed himself. Thorkel picks up one of the logs, but is bombarded by several more. They throw oil onto the logs and light it up, with Thorkel being burnt alive. Thorfinn prepares to disembark as Hild reminds him that the crossbow will be pointed at his head at all times. Einar and Leif use shields to protect themselves from the endless arrows. Leif is then hit by one of the arrows as he falls into the water. Einar grabs Leif as he says, "Shit, are we in hell?" Sigurd then helps the two up as they are shocked to see each other. Thorkel's men attempt to contain their leader after his severe burn wounds. Thorfinn then arrives to greet Thorkel. Sigurd, Einar, and Leif meet up with them as well. Unfortunately, Gudrid is still alone in the fortress. Sigurd wants his bride back as Thorfinn agrees to take care of it. A single fate awaits all those who lost: death. If you don't have a weapon in your hands, you can't go to Valhalla, so being executed is the worst way to die. Thorfinn then tends to Leif's wounds. Einar tells Thorkel that Balder is willing to hand over the chieftain spot peacefully. However, Thorkel isn't interested in the seat. He just likes fighting. Asker then wonders how Einar escaped. Einar lies to him and says that they descended with a rope. Later on, Asker gives Sigurd an important job. Thorfinn then makes his way through the secret passage with Hild, as Sigurd secretly follows them. The war continues to consume lives, one after another, for no reason. Thorfinn and Hild successfully make it into the well. Thorfinn begins climbing up as someone tosses a rope to them. Nanna, the maidservant to Balder, has come to help them out. Sigurd comes out of the well shortly afterwards, along with his friends, unbeknownst to him. He then tells them to go away. A soldier then catches them, but Sigurd uses his chain to steal away his sword, and with this, he finishes him off. Unfortunately, the two are quickly surrounded. Garm then goes to the gates of Jomsburg asking for his spear back. After getting denied access, he runs up the wall and lands gracefully inside. He steals a spear and begins a search for his own. Thorfinn knocks out the two Viking guards guarding Balder's room. He then says, "Gudrid, are you well?" A fire then starts in Jomsburg as Asgard instructs everyone to prepare for battle. Turns out that Sigurd's first objective was to start a fire, but his second objective is to open the fortress gate. Olm tells Sigurd he shouldn't marry Gudrid if he doesn't want to. Gudrid is a little embarrassed that Thorfinn came all this way just to save her. Thorfinn tells Baldur that he's not interested in taking the spot of chieftain. Floki then bursts into the room to check on Baldur. Just then, Thorfinn remembers his father's death. He's the one who had my father murdered. Hild fires her crossbow at one of the guards, while Thorfinn breaks the arm of the other. Floki! Says a seething Thorfinn. Floki! Thorfinn slaps Floki's sword away, while taking some fingers in the process. He goes in for the final blow as Baldur goes to protect his grandpa. Hild is prepared to stop Thorfinn before he strikes Floki. Baldur offers up his own life instead. It turns out that he blames himself for not stopping his grandfather and proliferating this reckless war. Thorfinn proceeds to break the blade of his sword over his knee. Hild lowers her crossbow as they tie up Floki and his men. That was close, mutters Thorfinn. Baldur leads them to the well. Unfortunately, it's been sealed up by the soldiers. Meanwhile, Sigurd and Olm are discovered within their barrels. Barrel crash, says Olm. The two are surrounded as Sigurd happens to look over at Gudrid and Thorfinn. Thorfinn will trade Baldur for safe passage through the gate. Floki begins seething in rage at the notion of Baldur getting hurt. Thorfinn then lightly cuts Baldur's face as Floki begins to lose it, agreeing to do whatever they say. Meanwhile, Garm watches the affair from a nearby rooftop. Now is not the time to pay any regard to appearances. Floki demands that they open up the gates just a little bit to preserve Baldur's life. Floki tells his men to buy some time as a man with a spear comes through. The star makes his entrance. Sorry to keep you waiting. Garm wants his rematch with Thorfinn and cares not about Baldur's life. Garm attacks Sigurd as Thorfinn comes in with a small dagger. Arrows start raining down as Thorfinn and Garm engage each other. Gudrid then threatens Baldur's life. However, she's holding a ladle. Back off! I'm gonna hack off the fucking nose off of this brat, says Sigurd. Thorfinn finds it difficult dodging the soldiers, archers, and Garm all at the same time. Finally, some time alone, just the two of us. Just then, the gate opens up, with Sigurd's party walking through. Deathseekers, charge! Yells Asker. The Jam Vikings can't close the gate and jeopardize Baldur's life. All the soldiers begin to charge Jomsburg. Sigurd tells the others to go ahead, but Gudrid slaps him in the face. Hild smashes him with a crossbow as she grabs onto the hostage. Olm escapes with Gudrid and Sigurd as Hild makes her way to Thorfinn with Baldur in hand. Thorfinn is getting weary from his wound, but he finally enters a battle stance. The siege continues as Thorkel swings his massive log with devastating effects. A man entering death then wonders where the Valkyries are. He then realizes that it was all a lie as his consciousness slowly fades away. I love war, screams Thorkel as he hacks people to pieces. Baldur returns to Floki as he apologizes to Thorfinn for all the death and calamity. Meanwhile, Garm continues thrusting his spear at Thorfinn. Garm then calls time out, accusing Thorfinn of not giving it his all. Thorfinn says that there's no meaning to fighting. Garm says it's all about having fun, and everyone likes having fun. Thorfinn then tosses away his knife, claiming that he's gonna have some fun now. However, Thorfinn will win without taking Garm's life. Thorfinn then mocks Garm by calling him a little kid. An enraged Garm lunges in with killer's intent. The two clash as Hild wonders what's going on. And it turns out that Thorfinn caught Garm's arms, much like Askeladd did to him so many years ago when he was a child. God damn it. It pisses me off that man was right, and his teaching just saved my life. Thorfinn headbutts Garm in the face. While unconscious, Garm remembers a time when he was a child and no one wanted to play with him. Even his own father despised him, calling him the Hellhound of legend, Garmer. One day, while playing with the older kids, he killed them. And when all the villagers went against him, he thought it was a fun game. Garm wakes up, realizing that he lost the battle. To prevent Garm from attacking again, Thorfinn threw his spear far away. Very far away. Now, Thorfinn hopes to be friends with him someday, as Garm says that they're already friends. After Garm leaves, Hild reminds Thorfinn that he got away with his life this time, but it might not happen again in the future. Thorkel calls Floki as the man himself nervously scurries away. The southern gate is open as the horde of soldiers rush in. Floki wants to escape on the eastern gate, which means they'd be abandoning Jomsburg. Floki curses Thorkel as an axe comes through the wall. Here's Thorkel! Floki summons Ymir, a hulking creature that looks more beast than man. Kinda looks like Bigfoot almost. Thorkel and Ymir trade blows, as Thorkel is pleased to be having so much fun. With them battling, Floki begins his escape. Sick of war, Balder looks to off himself, but can't go through with it. Now the following morning, two men share some bread together as the war has reached its conclusion. Turns out the two are enemies, but they couldn't care less at the moment. Now, Thorkel's group has Balder, as Floki emerges from his corridors, defeated. Elsewhere, Thorkel beats Ymir by submitting him. Now, Thorkel wants to keep Ymir so he can spar with him in the future. Thorfinn returns to his group as he proceeds to give Gudrid a hug. And upon receiving said hug, Gudrid becomes very overjoyed and embarrassed. Eskil then approaches Thorfinn and proclaims that he's the new chieftain of Jomsburg. Thorfinn puts on the chieftain cloak and wakes up Thorkel. I need you to do me a favor. Come with me for a moment. The execution of Floki and Balder will now begin. Thorfinn urges his men to quiet down. With his first order, he calls a Floki and Balder's executions. Second order, Jomsburg will be abandoned. Upon hearing this, the Vikings get a little bit agitated, so Thorkel puts them in their place. Now, Thorkel has authority from King Canute to resolve disputes among the Jom Vikings. And he's now putting this power onto Thorfinn since he's the new chieftain. And Thorfinn's third and final order is to disband the Jom Vikings. He then takes off his cloak and tells them to execute their orders. Balder and Floki are seen on a boat, as the boy is pleased to finally be fishing with his grandpa. Thorkel then takes Thorfinn to Thor's grave. Thorfinn thinks about his father's last words as he has a pained look in his face. For having played a part in Thorfinn's plot to disband the Jom Vikings, Thorkel now wants payback in the form of a duel. Gudrid doesn't want this duel to take place, however, but Thorkel isn't taking no for an answer. "You bastard!" yells Gudrid as she punches the tall man. Thorkel determines that Gudrid likes Thorfinn, to which she admits to. Thorkel then decides to let this go as he implores Thorfinn to marry her. Unbeknownst to them, Sigurd heard the whole conversation. Gudrid then packs her things, preparing to leave with Sigurd's crew. Sigurd offers her a deal though. If Thorfinn accepts her as a lover, she doesn't have to return to Iceland with him. Gudrid then goes back to Thorfinn to tell him how she feels about him. Thorfinn reminds her he's a murderous scoundrel, but she cares not about that. She just wants to know if Thorfinn likes her. Sigurd sails off with his crew before finding out Gudrid's answer. We're now back in Iceland, Thorfinn's hometown, July of 1019. Sigurd saves one of Ylva's children. He tells Thorfinn's mother and sister about how Thorfinn took his bride. He then makes his way to his father. Sigurd finally makes his return to his homeland. He breaks the news that he didn't bring Gudrid back, and how he feels disgraced by this. In fact, he feels so ashamed he doesn't even want to set foot on his homeland. But his father fiercely commands him to return home. As a kid, Sigurd lost to a girl and plays sword fights. We then see Sigurd in chains. Hat, Sigurd's childhood friend, arrives with a key in hand. Sigurd tells Hat that Gudrid is a tern, a migratory bird. Therefore, it wouldn't be right to keep her tethered down. Hat angrily reminds him that she saved his life, and that she's his one and only wife. So don't you ever bring her up again, says Hat. Sigurd plans to leave with Hat and his friends, but his father catches wind of this. Halfdan wants his son to become the king of Iceland. Sigurd cannot do this, so Halfdan attacks him with his chains. Sigurd says they have no chance of winning, since the armies are much stronger. Meanwhile, Sigurd's mother marvels at this sight, claiming that Halfdan is happy to have his son finally maturing. Sigurd then closes the distance on his father, and knocks him over. He says that their land is their wealth, as Halfdan commands his son to go away. Sigurd then takes his leave, as Halfdan is proud to see how strong his son has become. Now, because Sigurd renounced his title, his crew is no longer bound to serve him, but they remain loyal to him as a friend nonetheless. Hat tells Sigurd he's got a good heart, and that's the reason he was bad at fights as a kid. Sigurd's crew then sails off as Halfdan watches from a cliff. It is now 2 years later, and we're back at Iceland again. 6 ships are seen in the distance, so Ylva takes up arms to protect the village. The villagers start shooting arrows as someone on the boat starts to shout, "It's me! Thorfinn, son of Thor's! Are you daft enough to take me for another? Cease fire!" "Who was Thorfinn again?" says a man. "This is actually dangerous. Stay back, Gudrid," says Thorfinn. Thorfinn, having realized his dream of making money, has returned home. "Thorfinn," says Ylva, "I'm home, big sis." And with this, Ylva attempts to punch him in the face. Fortunately for Thorfinn, his reflexes have gotten better over the years, and he dodges it. She commands him to return Gudrid to Halfdan's farm. Instead of that, though, he introduces Ylva to his new family. Though they're now rich, Einar isn't interested in that. He wants to reach Vinland so that they can build houses, farm wheat, and make a country. Gudrid agrees to come with Thorfinn to apologize to Halfdan about what happened. Thorfinn greets Halfdan, thanking him for the horns that sold for a lot of money. Gudrid apologizes for inconveniencing Halfdan. Now, since Thorfinn didn't have a wedding celebration, Halfdan will host it. A grand celebration is held as flowers rain down upon the happy couple. Later on, Gudrid tells Halfdan that Sigurd gave her freedom. Thorfinn is seen climbing on a cliff with corpses hanging onto his body. "Just give me some time," says Thorfinn. Thorfinn then wakes up, realizing he was having a nightmare. Thorfinn is always alone in his dream, but Gudrid says that she'll help pull him up. Leif then draws a map of their upcoming journey to Vinland. It will take them roughly 6 weeks to arrive. Thorfinn wants Bug Eyes to sail ahead of them and map out a route. Bug Eyes, however, doesn't have any intention of going to Vinland. Thorfinn then holds an assembly, which is called a thing. He wants to recruit people who want to escape to a new land. He has one condition, however. Weapons are not permitted on the trip. While Thorfinn's crew rests up for the night, a woman named Halfdan introduces herself. Turns out she's a slave to Halfdan and wants to escape with Thorfinn. Halfdan was born in Ireland, and her father was like a massive storm. "Well done, my wife," says the father. Upon finding out the child was a girl, he gave the mother child support and left for war.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Turns out the mother gave her the name Cordelia. Her father returned to bring Halfdan her husband, so that she could make him some grandbabies. Cordelia ran away with her mother, but lost her during a shipwreck. She then became a slave to Halfdan. Halfdan then burst through the door to claim his property back. To obtain Cordelia from Halfdan, they'll have to pay him 80 sheep. "I offer you 2 cows instead," says Thorfinn. Halfdan refuses. "Halfdan, would you like to start a farm in Vinland?" Halfdan then decides to think things over. Hild makes a new rudder for the boat. Gudrid then wonders if Hild might be falling for Thorfinn. Gudrid becomes frustrated, realizing that Hild can do most things better than her. Thorfinn then meets up with the group that wants to join them to Vinland. However, they want to bring their weapons with them. Because it's a tool only for killing, swords are not needed in Vinland. Ivar is persistent to bring his sword, but Thorfinn is not yielding an inch. Ivar states that they need balance to maintain equal trading. Thorfinn still refuses, causing Ivar to get quite angry. Thorfinn says that swords only bring death, misery, and anger. A land without swords, it's worth a try. The group leaves as Hild wonders if Thorfinn is blaming all his misdeeds on the sword. Thorfinn then buys 2 horses and 24 sheep from Halfdan. Halfdan then implores Thorfinn to buy some weapons. Halfdan then gives Thorfinn some useful advice in regards to laws and their assembly. Now, punishment is dealt with according to the decision of a trial, but a law has no power without a standing military to make the system complete. Thorfinn recognizes the importance of interdependence and regulating society so that people can benefit from each other. In fact, it's in their best interest. "A piece of trade independence," says Thorfinn. Cordelia then tells Thorfinn that Halfdan has permitted her to travel to Vinland. "Thorfinn, won't you become my son? Inherit my island," says Halfdan. Halfdan has no successor, so he wants Thorfinn to be his adopted son. Thorfinn would have to stay here, but he could provide materials to Vinland as he saw fit. While Thorfinn mulls it over, Sigurd and Hat are seen approaching the mainland. They show their new baby, Null, to Sigurd's parents. "Rapa?" says the child. Upon hearing this, Halfdan grants the inheritance of all his property to Null. Thorfinn attempts to talk about Halfdan's offer, but the deal is officially dead. Sigurd implores Thorfinn to go to Vinland as he believes in him. It is now springtime, and the ice has begun to melt on the western sea route. Thorfinn's crew prepares their 5 ships as Ivar's crew decides to show up, and they're following Thorfinn's rules of bringing no weapons. Unbeknownst to Gudrid, however, Ivar's crew is sneaking some weapons onto the ship. And with this, they say their farewells and depart for Vinland. Now, Leif Erikson lived on a farm in Greenland, and he was the first man to land in Vinland. Thorfinn meets up with Leif, telling him that they need to recruit more pioneers. Now, Leif has gone a bit senile, and his hearing is impaired at the moment. Bug Eyes left for Norway, and he's been gambling with his new Norwegian girl. Leif shows Thorfinn the old smoke pipe he received from the Indians. It's been 20 years since Leif went to Vinland. Thorfinn then thinks about the last 20 years of his life. "If Thors could see you right now, I can't imagine how pleased he would be. Follow your heart, my son." "I will, father," says Thorfinn. In a flashback, Thorfinn chases someone down, but is unsuccessful. Thorfinn regains his consciousness as he wonders who knocked him down. Gudrid is excited to see what the West has in store for her. Thorfinn then meets Gudrid's younger brother, Otto. He wants to go to Vinland, but has a pregnant wife at home. Thorfinn says that they'll be coming back often, so he can come in the future. Some pirates bring Bug Eyes back to call in on his debts. Thorfinn fronts Bug Eyes the money, as Bug Eyes says that he'll go to Vinland to build a country free of gambling debt.
It's the
On their way to Vinland, Bug-Eyes says he'll make at least 40 pounds worth of gold. It's been many days since they've seen land, and they're using the stars and sun for navigation. They then spot some whales in the distance. One of the passengers worries about Jormungand, monsters of the sea. Gudrun worries that they might sail off the edge of Midgard.
For a trip to
No, there's
South
no raise the money. I got the money.
Okay, you got the money.
I got the money. You want me to choke you out?
Hild suspects that the world is a sphere, because the line of the horizon curves ever so slightly. Dead ahead! Land ho! Yells Bug-Eyes. He then sees what looks like a Jormungand, and subsequently passes out. The settlers then successfully land in Vinland. Now it turns out that they're between Helluland and Markland, hence there are no trees or plains. They make their way to Markland, finding copious amounts of trees. However, this is not good enough for Einar, since he wants to build a country that will sustain the growing numbers. 13 of the people want to stay in Markland, so Thorfinn will allow them to keep a ship and supplies. And this will serve as a transfer base to the homeland. Now upon hearing this, Hild notes that this sounds like the talk of a soldier. He's still waging a war in his heart. A war with no enemies, says Hild. Upon their travels, they discover a house built by Norsemen. This is Vinland, says Thorfinn. After celebrating for a bit, Thorfinn finds an arrow with an arrowhead made out of stone. And to avoid any conflict with the natives, they decide to travel further south. We finally reached the 180th chapter, and we arrived in Vinland, even beyond where Leif Erikson was. Thorfinn requires certain things for their new home: a bay, fresh water, a forest, and a plain. They then find a great plain with good sunlight and proper soil. Thorfinn reminds Ivar that the land belongs to no one. Thorfinn and Hild ride through the forest, as the latter enjoys the ambiance. The two hear a noise, so Thorfinn offers up some wheat, bread, and dried pork to let them know that they come in peace.
Don't be afraid.
Thorfinn is satisfied with how the encounter went, as we see the indigenous people inspecting the bags. Thorfinn's crew then gets busy chopping trees and building their settlement. Some of the crew is heading back to Greenland for additional supplies and people. Some of the villagers talk about how Thorfinn was a warrior as strong as Fenrir and could even take down a bear. The villagers then make a monument for their goddess, so that she can watch over the land. Turns out Einar found this in Greece, and had it fixed up to bring here to Vinland. Her name is Arnhind, and they eventually called their base Arnhind's Village. Just for reference, Thorfinn's current location is present-day Prince Edward Island. Thorfinn then discovers that they're on an island. Ivar worries about attacks from the natives, recommending that they build more ships. In fact, if they don't prioritize shipmaking, they put the entire village of 40 people at risk. It's normal for men to like war. You're the odd one out, says Ivar. Thorfinn claims that not everyone likes war. In fact, King Canute hates war. Thorfinn's crew continues clearing the forest without a day's rest. Thorfinn notices that the indigenous people are peeking at them from the trees. Meanwhile, the natives wonder why Thorfinn's group is spreading ash across the fields, and they consider the possibility that it's some sort of spell.
Oh, how magical.
Yeah, these kids are pretty special.
Back at their camp, the natives wonder how they should deal with the white people. The Pewin, which is like a shaman, says that the white people are making a field to grow crops. However, the Pewin saw the devastation firsthand once before, and so he has his reservations. Thorfinn thinks about how they'll have a wheat field by next spring. Just then, the natives start approaching. A critical first greeting. Ivar pulls out his sword as Thorfinn extends his hand in a show of good faith. Now it turns out that Pewin will perform the ritual, but Nisqua worries about his health. Carly becomes very possessive of the swing that his dad built. Meanwhile, the Nord settlers argue over how the land should be distributed. Einar wants to share the land equally, but the disagreements rage on. Cordelia thinks about a conversation she had earlier with Ivar. Ivar claimed that Thorfinn was naive on how the world really worked. The sword is necessary, and the time of its necessity will come soon. Styric advises Cordelia not to tell Thorfinn about their weapons. He also says that they're here to help him out by protecting the settlement. Thorfinn pushes Carly on the swing as he implores him to apologize to the others. The settlers then create a well. Thorfinn will test the water for a month before anyone else tries it. Polmuk and the others unknowingly start walking on the wheat. Now it turns out that Bug-Eyes understands a little bit of the native language, but can't understand Nisqua. She then marvels at the ship built by the Nords. "You there, the new person! Don't touch that ship!" yells Ivar. She runs away and into Cordelia. She then begins conversing with Bug-Eyes as they teach each other their respective languages. A bear is noticed at the camp, so Hild decides to track it down. She reminisces about how she became a teacher for the village, and how Carly asked her why she didn't forgive her daddy. "When the time comes, will you forgive daddy?" Hild discovers that the bear went into hibernation, so she decides to leave it be. While resting, a man with a bear mask approaches her. Now it turns out that she abstained from killing the bear because they encroached upon its land and it posed no threat to them. The man wanders off as Hild leaves the next morning. Pulwin then performs a ritual to see the future. In his vision, he sees armies of men shooting guns at each other. He believes it's an intra-Norse war. He then sees meadows as far as the eye can see. The Lanu of this time trade beaver pelts for weapons. War and disease ravage the people, and it looks like the Lanu have a bleak future. An atomic bomb then goes off, terrifying Pulwin beyond belief. We must be rid of the Norse. Their destruction! Pulwin wakes up from his vision, as Nisqua is pleased to see he's still alive. Now, because the disbanded Jan Vikings knew of no other life, they spent the next 2 years pirating the seas. Unfortunately, they were caught, so Canute gave the order to behead them. Thorfinn, whose ship the Vikings were after, implored Canute not to kill them. Thorfinn questioned the pirates' belief in Valhalla, proposing that the gods could be lying about the notion of Ragnarok. Thorfinn offers Vargar a choice, to go to Valhalla by Canute's hand or start a new country with him. And that's how Vargar became Thorfinn's trusted captain, who transported supplies and people from Iceland and Greenland to Vinland. Under a blue sky, an unprophesized path opens. Thorfinn is now 27, and the wheat that they planted in autumn has survived the winter, and has now become a golden crop. The village places the yield into a comb to separate the wheat from the chaff. Though most of the villagers marvel at Hild's invention, one of them says it's witchcraft.
She's the witch. Yeah, she's the witch.
I was just about to accuse her.
Meanwhile, Bugeyes continues teaching Nisqua while Gudrid and the other women make bread. Though Thorfinn is a decent guy, Ivar still doesn't like him since he won't pick up the sword. Gudrid shows Thorfinn the bread she made. She also reveals that she has a bun in the oven. Upon gazing at the happy family, Hild realizes that it's useless in hanging on to her rage. Thorfinn, I verified your atonement with my own eyes. Thorfinn, I forgive you. Thorfinn walks over to Hild and immediately breaks down. You've atoned enough. My anger is quenched. You worked hard to be released from the curse of my revenge. You fought admirably. You are a true warrior. One of the villagers passes away, so Thorfinn and Einar build them a grave. Vargar returns to Thorfinn to tell them that they were attacked by several arrows when they went to Markland. Thorfinn wants to check in on the Markland people, as Ivar volunteers to go with him. After 8 days, they arrive at the settlements in Markland, but find no one inside the dwellings. Though Thorfinn doesn't think their friends are dead, they can't devote any more resources to searching them out. Ivar then approaches Thorfinn and says, "This is your fault. Because of you, we lost 13 people and 1 ship." He implores Thorfinn to buy weapons from Halfdan to avoid future problems with the natives. Thorfinn returns to Vinland to apprise the villagers of what happened in Markland. Now it turns out that the Gippi tribe that they associate with is different from the one up north, so he implores them to keep friendly relations. Mr. Ugi remains skeptical, thinking that the Lanu will attack at every opportunity. In fact, an axe went missing the other day, as they suspect that the Lanu stole it. Mr. Ugi says that they must protect their land and get some weapons. The Norsemen are invaders, says Pulwin. Pulmok is drunk off of the Nord's alcohol, as Pulwin yells at him for succumbing to their ways. Pulmok is also wearing the Nord's clothing. He tells Pulwin about the process of making bread, and how it provides a sustainable food source for the entire village. Chief Gippi wants to learn from the Norsemen, so as to make their lives easier. Pulwin, however, remains resolute in driving the Norsemen from this land. Gudrid chases away some rats that were in the wheat sacks. Hild then shows what Ivar's been up to. Turns out he's been building a fort on his own accord. He tells Thorfinn they are building it to protect the ships in case of a worst case scenario. Although Gippi's tribe is not the enemy now, it's possible they might turn into the enemy in the future. Hild reminds Ivar that they are breeding mistrust, which could eventually lead to war. Styric states that mutual dependence could break down if the Lanu learn how to make bread. I demand an emergency thing, says Styric. Cordelia then remembers the words of her father and Ivar. Cordelia, somewhere, you will find a place where you can live as yourself. Ivar begins the meeting by stressing the importance of the sword. He says they'll continue to grow their village, which means that their lands will have to expand into the native territory. The men start to side with Ivar. Gudrid reminds them of Thorfinn's words before they started the expedition. We want to create a country without slaves or war. Cordelia then says that Ivar smuggled swords to Vinland. Thorfinn is furious to find this out. He thusly wants to turn it into a sickle blade. Styric urges everyone to stand behind the person that they agree with in this matter. Besides Thorfinn and Einar, all the men side for weapons, while the women side against it. Unfortunately, the men outnumber the women 3-1. Thorfinn wonders why they can't settle their disputes through talking, but Ivar says a strong man doesn't want to talk to a weak man. Without equal strength, you won't even make it to the negotiation table. The Lunu then arrive, as Thorfinn says that talking is the first resort. Nisqua and Bug-Eyes will serve as the interpreters. Thorfinn begins the proceedings by smoking with the natives, but he immediately starts to cough. By sharing the same tobacco, they agree not to lie to each other. Gippy heard about the situation with the people in Markland, but it was the deed of another unrelated tribe. We wish to get along with you Norsemen. After reaching an agreement, Thorfinn tells Ivar that they don't need a fort anymore. Mr. Oogie still has his doubts, as Puin walks into the conversation. Only I know how barbaric you Norsemen are, says Puin in his own language. That's why this is the only way. Puin sets his sights on Thorfinn. He gets ready for the strike as blood splatters all over the place. However, it turns out that Ivar used his sword first to cut off Puin's hand. Lanu blood is spilled in Vinland. Thorfinn takes off his belt so that he can bind Puin's arm. Einar wants to treat him, but Ivar says that the Lanu are treacherous. The Lanu's friendly behavior was just to lull us into a false sense of security. This is their objective. Einar wants to talk things out, yet Ivar claims that the Lanu are their enemies. Not enemy, screams Nisqua. She speaks about Puwitagon, but doesn't know the Norse translation. Thorfinn urges everyone to act rationally, but the Lanu take their leave into the forest. Hild angrily confronts Ivar. Thorfinn said not to move, so why did you move? Ivar claimed he saved Thorfinn's life, but Hild claims he could have dodged the attack with ease. Thorfinn claims that the Puin was laughing since his expectations were fulfilled. His intent was never to kill me, he meant to be killed. Thorfinn's group fell for Puin's ruse. A world without weapons is still far away. Vinland. This wall is a fortress of mistrust. Thorfinn and his friends go to the natives' village to give gifts, but the Lanu are nowhere to be seen. Polmuk and Nisqua return to talk to the group. Turns out Puin was the only one who saw the Norsemen as enemies. Now as it turns out, Puin vanished into the forest without getting his wound treated, and Puin feared that if the trees and the animals died, the Lanu may die as well. Hild talks to the children about the Lanu, claiming that they are not bad people. Do you know what true war is? Says a child. Hild remembers the time the Vikings came to her village and burned it down to the ground. It won't become war. I won't let it, says Hild. Those two. It's those two. In accordance with the security pledge, the group moved quickly and decisively. Nearly all the men put aside work in the fields to build the outer wall. Einar wonders what Thorfinn will do if war breaks out with the Lanu. Now Einar loves Vinland. Before this, no matter what happened, I don't want to go anywhere that wasn't here. Thorfinn wants to set up some sort of meeting with Puin so that they can come to some sort of compromise. Thorfinn reminds Einar that too much wealth brings disaster, so they'll have to negotiate a peaceful coexistence with the Lanu. There will be no war. I won't allow it. Carly says that Hild said the same thing. Hild is going to defeat the cause of war. Ivar's group begins a reconnaissance. Ganglati then finds himself hanging from a tree after stepping into a trap. Styric suspects that this was Hild's doing, since it bears the markings of a skilled Norse. Turns out that Styric is well aware that the Lanu don't want to escalate tensions. The threat of war was the most effective way for you to seize power from Thorfinn's grasp. As tensions continue, people will look for the strongest to lead them. Clear now? You, replies Ivar. Styric falls into a pit trap. He commands Ivar to run since Hild is coming to kill him. The hand that shook Thorfinn's lifts a weapon in the name of peace. Thorfinn looks for Hild as he hears something off in the distance. Styric is stuck in a hole with downward-facing spikes, meaning the more he struggles, the more they dig in. Ivar clarifies something. I love war. Not love. Really, I admire it. But even so, I don't want to be the cause of war. Styric apologizes for not thinking things through. An arrow flies by Ivar's head, clipping off a piece of his ear. Styric implores Hild to come out so that they can talk. An arrow then goes into Gengu's leg. Ivar, stand up straight. Styric recommends that he stays low so that he won't be killed. An arrow goes through Styric's helmet. Luckily for him, it went through the gap of the top of his helmet. Ivar stands up and proceeds to berate Hild. We then see Hild hiding in the brush. She lines up her shot with her crossbow, but refrains from pulling the trigger when Thorfinn walks in. Hild, let's put an end to this. This assassination is a failure if I find out, right? Hild emerges from the brush. Take down the fort, says Hild. If they don't take it down by year's end, she'll kill Ivar's crew. Thorfinn begs for Hild not to leave, but she takes no heed to his words. She then turns her attention to finding Pjolwin, so that she can prevent this oncoming war.
Vargar arrives in Markland to find a starving man lying on the ground. Markland has been deserted since early summer, so it was speculated that they were attacked by the Lanu. The man states that all the indigenous people are dead, and that the birds were possessed by dead spirits. He urges the others to leave Vinland. Coexisting with the indigenous people is impossible. They must flee before a war breaks out. Elsewhere, Canute commands a group of archers to execute a group of villagers. The village is burnt down, as soldiers execute anyone that they can find. One of the soldiers hesitates, but Canute kills her without a second's thought. Now the reason that they are killing their own is because of the spreading epidemic. An unidentified ship that drifted in 20 days ago is a suspected culprit. Canute recalls similar outbreaks that occurred during the days of King Alfred. Canute then wonders what Thorfinn would do in such a scenario, but regardless, Canute wouldn't be able to imitate it. Back in Vinland, Einar states that Hild is much like Canute, sacrificing the few to save the many. Einar realizes that Canute was not as bad as he made him out to be. He then wonders if killing Pjolwin will end the war, and if that would be a righteous violence. Thorfinn disagrees with the notion of righteous violence. The three return to camp to discover that Vargar rescued someone from Markland. The group gathers around, as the man prepares to recount the downfall of Markland. Now Pjolwin's injury is healed up, and with this, he's ready to move forward with his plan. He wants to use his missing hand to rally the other tribes to attack the Nordic people. Pamuk comes rushing over, claiming that the Gippi will lose its chief. Now Flot is the only survivor from Markland. At first, relations were prosperous with the natives, but then things became quite hostile. The others left Flot behind as he spent his days running away from the natives. One day, Flot noticed a dead native floating in the water. When he went upstream, he found that the native adults and the children were all dead. Meanwhile, Pamuk shows the shaman the sickness that has befallen his people. Chief Gippi and Niska are sick as well. Now Pjolwin has seen this in his vision, and he believes it's a curse that's brought about by the Nords. Ivar thinks that this is great for them, but Vargar punches him in the face for his rudeness. Chief Gippi's corpse is then burned, as Pamuk asks Pjolwin what they should do next. We must prevent any more disasters from spreading, thinks Pjolwin. Now Pamuk and Niska didn't show up for the exchange of information with Thorfinn, which made Thorfinn wonder how the Gippi were doing. Thorfinn discovers some of the new footprints, as he wants to check in on the natives. Cordelia then cooks up for Gudrid as she's very pregnant and tired. Carly tells Cordelia that Hild is really smart, and that if she decided to kill Pjolwin and Ivar, that she must have done it for a good reason. But on the other hand, Thorfinn says that they have no enemies, which makes Carly conflicted. Because Thorfinn's words were the kindest, Cordelia is inclined to believe them. Elsewhere, we see Hild sneaking up on the Lanu while they're holding a gathering. The tribes have all gathered together to hear Pjolwin's speech about how the Nords are very dangerous, and that they need to be driven across the ocean from whence they came. Hild wants to eliminate Pjolwin, but realizes that the fervor for war is already too strong. Muin, another Lanu leader, wants to preserve the Nord's materials, but Pjolwin warns against the illness. Now Hild wants to take out Muin, but just then, Thorfinn burst onto the scene. A showdown between two men with iron will begin. After eating a hearty dinner, Gudrid begins having labor pains. Meanwhile, the Lanu take a hostile approach towards Thorfinn's crew. Bug-Eyes can't understand what they are saying, so he calls out for Niska. Niska says that the illness is the work of the evil spirits, and not the fault of the Nords. She goes over to Bug-Eyes and explains that she's Winpanet, the native word for diseased. The Lanu are certain that the Nords brought the disease with them, so they want them to leave the island by any means necessary. Despite the rising tensions, Niska says that they must work together during these hard times. You're a good kid. You'd make a good wife, says Bug-Eyes. What's a wife? Remarks Niska. Thorfinn thinks about his family very fondly before he decides to leave Vinland. And with this, everyone is absolutely shocked by his decision. Einar refuses to leave the village that they worked so hard to build up. If they stay, however, constant battles will take place, leading to a dismal future for their children. The Lanu are taken aback by this decision, as the warrior leader says that his men won't like this. A creeping crisis. Now Gudrid is in severe pain due to the ongoing labor process. Cordelia and Carly are kicked out as Carly decides to make a campfire. Now Carly thinks he can stay up all night and wait for the new baby brother, but he quickly falls asleep. Cordelia then notices some Lanu off in the distance as they begin their attack on the Nords. One of the warriors wants a sword, but the dying Nordic woman doesn't understand him. Since they can't find what they're looking for, they decide to burn the house down. They continue their hunt by making their way to Cordelia's house. Elsewhere, Pjolwin agrees to give the Nords until next spring to leave Vinland. Mjolwin disagrees, since giving the Nords more time would increase the odds of them getting attacked. Now it turns out that Mjolwin also wants a sword for himself. The tribesmen fight amongst themselves about who should get the Nords' swords. In the frenzy, the Nords escape with Miska. Einar then expresses his inner turmoil, and how leaving Vinland is just too painful for him. Now Thorfinn doesn't consider the Lanu his enemy, but Einar says that that's stupid. Just then, the Lanu aim their bows at them, officially beginning the war between the Lanu and the Nordic people. Thorfinn blocks the arrow with his body, identifying 3 people and 1 bowman. He races into action, but his abdominal wound hinders his movement. It looks to be all over, until an arrow goes through one of the natives' hand. Thorfinn uses this opportunity to subdue his captors, impressing Niska. "Thank you, Hild, you saved me." Thorfinn's internal organs are fine, but his rib might be a little bit injured. Thorfinn bandages himself up, as he instructs Hild to escort Einar and Bug Eyes to the village. Now Einar doesn't like the idea. Hild offers to help Thorfinn out, but Thorfinn wants to prevent any more harm to the Lanu. Now the best Hild can do is avoid any fatal blows, like shots to the head or the torso. "Einar, we're withdrawing only to avoid war," says Thorfinn. Einar walks away without saying a word, clearly disgusted with the decision. The Lanu attack once more, as Thorfinn and Hild employ their plan. While Gudrid is still in labor, Cordelia brings over Carly, and warns the midwife that the natives are burning down the houses. The Lanu approach Cordelia, who is nervously holding a club and shield. Ga'alqui orders his men to use their bow and arrows to eliminate Cordelia. Now all Cordelia can do is curl up into a ball and pray for someone to save him. A war that could not be avoided, now must be stopped. Ivar and his crew notice the fire off in the distance, propelling them to take action. In a flashback, Cordelia thinks about how his life has been nothing but bullying. There's nowhere he can hide. He apologizes to his mother for feeling useless, but his mother reassures him that true strength comes from a kind heart. In a shipwreck, Cordelia's mom prioritizes her son's life over her own, leading to her untimely demise. It's time for the true strength inside of you to awaken. Cordelia's flashback ends with the sound of Gudrid's baby inside the house. Cordelia flexes all the arrows off of his body and clenches onto the frame of the door. "You will not pass through this door. Leave." Ga'alqui thrusts his spear into Cordelia, but Cordelia endures the pain with no reaction. "Forget it. Let's leave it. There isn't a big knife inside this house anyhow. If you want to have a long life, don't fight him. He's probably the Nord's strongest warrior." Ga'alqui notes that even when he thrusts his spear into Cordelia, nothing happened. It didn't cause a wound whatsoever. It seems that Thorkel's genes passed on in full to Cordelia. The power to lure people into the path of violence, a tool of destruction. Vinland, the country without a war, is burning. Ivar looks for Jarni, but finds that he's been stabbed to death. "This means war, Lanu," proclaims Ivar. Now Styric wonders why they didn't burn up the bodies, unless the Lanu are setting them up for some sort of diversion. Ivar orders his men to warn the people and to get inside the fort. Just then, an arrow pierces Ivar in the backside. What's more, arrows are literally raining down from the sky upon them. Turns out that the Lanu trapped them into going towards the fire, so that they would be perfectly illuminated in the night. The Lanu approach the bodies, as Ga'alqui finally attains the sword that he so desired. Ganglati, who used his body to shield Ivar, appears to be dead, or at least seriously injured. Ga'alqui points the sword at Ivar, commanding him to relinquish the sheath for the sword. Ivar grabs onto Ganglati's axe, prepared to fight to the death. Now Styric wants Ivar to flee, but Ivar's stubbornness gets the best of him. The two headstrong leaders enter into combat, with Ivar losing his right hand. Turns out the axe was no match for the sword. Ivar cannot believe what just happened, as Ga'alqui is amazed with the performance of his new weapon. Ga'alqui's efforts have been fruitful, while Ivar can only hang his head in shame. And with this, Ga'alqui raises his sword up into the night sky, with the flames of war burning in the background. And goddamn if that is not an epic scene right there. I mean, Vinland Saga is in full force with this scene. The one protected with this arrow is the one that she had most wanted to kill. A couple of Lanu lie on the ground after getting hit by Hild. It seems like the pursuers are taken care of, as Hild only has 4 arrows left. More warriors enter the scene as Hild needs to escape post-haste. Meanwhile, Thorfinn is getting chased down, but he can't breathe properly due to his chest wound. He tackles one of the Lanu as he needs to keep running. Unfortunately, 2 more arrows hit him in the backside. Thorfinn falls down to the ground as Hild comes in to subdue the Lanu. While Thorfinn dreams, Thorkel reminds him that war in Vinland was inevitable. But if they leave Vinland, their experiment will fail, which means that there's no land of peace. Thorfinn stirs awake as Hild carries his body to safety. Hild reminds Thorfinn that he's not dying, and if there were more people like him in the world, there would be a lot less wars. Don't lose heart, Thorfinn. You weren't wrong about anything at all, so don't give up. Hild then notices Pomuk with a look of malice on his face. Einar, Bug-Eyes, and Nisqua make it through the forest unharmed. Now she is not permitted to enter the Nord's lands, as she hides herself from the villagers. Einar hears about the attack from the Lanu, as the villagers are now evacuating to the fort. Bug-Eyes distracts Mr. Oogie so that he won't discover Nisqua. Bug-Eyes tells the villagers that the Lanu army is 300 men strong. Evacuation to a nearby island seems like the most reasonable course of action. Bug-Eyes reassures Gudrid that Thorfinn is okay. Now Ivar reminds him that they built this fort to protect themselves. And for the first time ever, Einar and Ivar are on the same page. I will fight. I don't care what Thorfinn says. I will defend this village even if I have to do it by myself, says Einar. We are the ones that built Arnheid's village. The various men agree to protect the village that they worked so hard to build. And with this, the Lanu start burning down the houses, as the villagers prepare themselves for war. The flames of plunder blaze. The Lanu take whatever materials they can from the burning houses. Puin warns them about the plague of the Nord's materials, but the warriors have heard enough of his ramblings, for now it's the time of war. Meanwhile, the Nords start fortifying the defenses for the fort. Muin figures they're trying to buy some time to make an escape, but he and his warriors will not afford them that luxury. Gaokwi returns as Muin wants him to cut off the Nords' escape with their canoes. Meanwhile, another faction is going to focus on destroying the wall. The Nords are in the midst of evacuating Vinland, as they load the limited supplies onto the ships. Gudrid refuses to board the ship until Thorfinn returns, but Cordelia reminds her that she must evacuate and protect the baby. Cordelia instructs Carly to take care of Gudrid, as it's now his time to fight the Lanu, and with this, the ships depart as Carly waves to Cordelia. Unfortunately, they don't make it too far until they encounter the Lanu in their canoes. The women take shelter as the Lanu move quickly and decisively against the Nords. Elsewhere, the Lanu attempt to set fire to the Nord's wall. Gunther attempts to put out the flames with a bucket of water, but unfortunately for him, an arrow goes straight through his eye and kills him. Einar instructs his men to preserve the arrows as Styrek implores him to take care of the fires first. Ivar, who is basically useless at this point since he lost his arm, says they need to gain as much time as possible. If they can hold out here, the Lanu will eventually die out from sickness. So with that, the Nords can probably hold out for about 3 to 4 days, but anything more than that, and they'll be completely wiped out. Although the Lanu came to a truce with the Nords, it seems it's all in vain, as the fires of war have thrown everything into chaos. Niska wonders if they can really bring about a better future through war. Puin states that the Nords and the Lanu cannot coexist. Even if they were to drive them out right here, the Nords would certainly return once more. So in Puin's eyes, they have no choice but to kill him off here and now. Pomuk claims that Puin only sees bad futures, which means it's in his nature to focus only on the bad and to not look at the good. Now as it just so happens, Pomuk gave Thorfinn shelter since he was badly wounded, and now he wishes to save him. But to do so, they're going to need Puin's knowledge of medicine to save him from the brink. The Lanu use a detachment force to sneak up to the tip of the fortress's north wall. One of the Lanu sneaks around, but that's when Cordelia uses a massive log to knock him into the sea. The Lanu start burning the outer wall. Bug-Eyes brings over some water to put it out, but he trips in the process. Einar successfully hits one of the Lanu with his bow, but he looks a little bit shocked that he nearly killed someone. He then takes a grazing shot to the face, but tells his companions not to let up. After a day of fighting, Muin scolds his soldiers for using the Nord's houses to rest up, since it might spread the disease. Gaokwi wants to control the Nord's food supply, which should put an end to things rather quickly. A Lanu man then sneaks into the fortress, as the Nords capture him in the process. Now Einar is not happy that they have to kill him, but it's a necessary measure since he saw the inside of their fortress. Today's battle killed Aurunkel and Kalton. This is for them. Afterwards, Bug-Eyes wonders if Einar is okay with this. But for the time being, this is their only method for protecting Arnheim village. The next day, it's clear that the Lanu don't know how to attack a fort, which means the Nords could just wait them out until they die from the disease.
Unfortunately for them, a large fleet of Lanu canoes start approaching from the rear. With this, the frontal forces start climbing the walls of the fort, putting immense pressure on the Nords. The weight of the situation paralyzes Styric, but Einar says he'll intercept them to buy them some time. Despite his condition, Ivar will do what he can to defend the village. It is now Styric's responsibility to command his comrades on the wall. Tears stream down Styric's face, but now is not the time for wallowing as he starts commanding his troops. Upon entering the fray, Ivar feels very good about himself. And this is what he's wanted all along. He wanted to fight for a cause. He wanted a reason to feel alive. Unfortunately for him, he gets pierced by multiple spears. And in this moment, he thinks about his friends in a peaceful field. He then claims that he's a true warrior, drawing his final breath and collapsing to the ground. The situation looks dire, but that's when Vargar and his crew approach the shore. And Vargar has a look of rage on his face. Desperate to do whatever it takes to protect Arnheim village, Einar raises a spear against the Lanu. The Lanu draw lots to determine who will have the honor of fighting him, which surprises Einar since they could have just ganged up on him. The Lanu warrior attacks, with Einar reminding himself that it's either kill or be killed. There's no choice in the matter. Vargar and the other Nords make landfall, ready to turn the tide of this losing battle. Rout them! We can give no quarter now! Instill the fear of the Yam Vikings into the Lanu! The Lanu are completely overwhelmed, forcing them to retreat back to their canoes. Vargar then looks over at Einar, witnessing his comrade's first ever kill. After getting pierced, the Lanu man struggles on the ground, so Einar proceeds to gash him several more times in a fit of rage. Vargar now wants to get Einar treated, but Einar is stuck in a trance of sorts, repeating the words, "I had no choice, I had no choice." Elsewhere, we see Thorfinn waking up. As he lies on the verge of death, the people Thorfinn slaughtered appear in front of his eyes. Despite Thorfinn's best efforts to bring about peace, the plan has backfired spectacularly. The people around him who were killed by him remind him that the journey is not a failure. He has set sail on a 1,000-year voyage. He needs to just start rowing. And with this, Thorfinn awakes from his dream, with Niska relieved to see that he's okay. Thorfinn is surprised that he's still alive, as he asks Niska how long he's been passed out. Hild informs Thorfinn that he's been out for 6 days, but it's a miracle that he's still alive since he got hit by 6 arrows, one of them being poisonous. Hild wanted to inform the others about Thorfinn's health, yet it was impossible with the current situation. Now Thorfinn wants to resolve the matter promptly to avoid any more death, but his condition is suboptimal. Though Thorfinn agreed to leave, he still believes reconciliation is a possibility between the Nords and the Lanu. He will strive to find a cure for the disease afflicting the Lanu, and in this way, they can finally live together. Now it sounds ludicrous, but Pomok remains adamant that the Nords are good people. Before using the mysteries of the spirits, you thought we should make friends of the Nords, didn't you? Says Pomok to Puin. Puin is unmoved by his words, saying that the two sides are enemies. No, I have no enemies, responds Thorfinn. This response completely shocks Puin, and with this, Puin admits to his own mistakes. Some Lanu tell Gyaokwi to stay away from the battlefield since everything is a mess right now. Worried that these men might spread the disease, Gyaokwi has them taken out with bows and arrows. Muin also has the disease, as Gyaokwi says that nobody who fought the Nords is allowed behind the perimeter. Gyaokwi then pulls out his impressive new sword, claiming it now makes him the ruler of this island. Serves you right, now I'm the boss of this island. Thorfinn, along with the Lanu, approach Gyaokwi, ready to talk brass tacks. Before that though, Thorfinn kicks aside the Gippi fire, saddened that they used one of the Nords' gravestones. This is an important object. I'd appreciate it if you could tell everyone to leave it as is. Now to get the Nords to evacuate, Gyaokwi wants to use Thorfinn as a hostage. Now despite Thorfinn's attempts to escape men who love murder and war, it turns out that they're also here in Vinland. He simply can't outrun them. Gyaokwi takes Thorfinn to the Gippi troops, as he and the Lanu are shocked by how many have died from the disease. Vargar is pleased to see Thorfinn, and wants to save him from the Gippi, but Thorfinn says they need to negotiate with the Lanu. Niska is pleased to see that Bug Eyes is still alive. She also wants to hold him to his word and become his wife. Thorfinn relates the terms of the ceasefire, that being that the Nords evacuate the island. Styric is none so pleased with this agreement, saying it's one-sided. If we hold out a bit longer, we'll win. If we persevere a bit longer, the Lanu will all drop dead from the illness, and this island will be ours, says Styric. Styric attempts to bluff about their current military strength, but Thorfinn can see through his lies. Vargar quietly instructs his men to fire a volley of arrows to clear a path for Thorfinn. True victory is not killing all your enemies, it's making peace with them, proclaims Thorfinn. Styrik then catches sight of Gyaokwi, lighting an immense fire in his belly. Thorfinn then calls for Einar, but his once peaceful friend is filled with rage and contempt. Styrik and Einar decide to exit the fort, so they can continue the negotiations with Thorfinn face to face. Now without asking a single question, Thorfinn can tell that Einar just killed his first person. Einar breaks down, admitting that the burden that he now lives with is simply too much to bear. Styrik shows little compassion, saying it was necessary to preserve his own life. Einar wants Thorfinn to validate his choice, to agree that he was right in killing another man. Even if now I told you that you were right, the weight of the death you struggle under would not vanish, says Thorfinn. Einar finally realizes how amazing Thorfinn is, and acknowledges that he's a true warrior. He then echoes Thorfinn's idea for a truce. Gyaokwi is relieved that the Nords agree to a truce, and will even provide some food as a parting gift. Styrik cannot accept that his two best friends, Ivar and Gingladi, have died in this battle. So he now makes an irrational choice, and he goes straight for Gyaokwi. I'm not having a truce, proclaims Styrik. Einar grabs the back of his cloak at the last second, to prevent him from making a grave error. Styrik quickly takes out a dagger and stabs Einar in the neck. Hild attempts to stop him, but he continues pursuing Gyaokwi relentlessly. Unfortunately for him, Gyaokwi uses his sword to put him down in one clean strike. Though the Nords want to retaliate, Vargar reminds him that if they shoot now, it will end the truce. Though Thorfinn says that the wound is shallow on Einar, it's clear that he doesn't have long to live. Einar then wonders what Arnhild would think of him now, if she knew that he just killed a man. Tears stream down Thorfinn's face, realizing that his brother is drawing his final breath. A tragic end to a beautiful friendship. Thorfinn, just remember this. If you're in danger in the days ahead, and your options dwindle, and you're forced to take that last resort that you fear, remember that I know how you feel. Never forget that, brother. The Nords bury Einar next to the bust of Arnhild, and although it's a very tragic moment, it's sort of beautiful in a way. He's being buried in the land that he strives so hard to get to. The wives of the Nord soldiers cry over their husbands' dead bodies, unable to believe what has transpired. Vargar informs the women about the current developments, saying that if they don't find their husband among the dead, then he's still alive. Mr. Oogie blames Thorfinn for the whole debacle, and demands to know how they'll be compensated for their lost land. Carly fires back, saying that Daddy isn't wrong for having tried to make peace with the Lanu. Yet Mr. Oogie is vehement that Thorfinn's ideals were wrong, and he's very harsh when he says this too. Cordelia tells Hild that she would have resorted to violence to protect Gudrid, Carly, and the baby from the Gippi. Now Cordelia really doesn't understand the gravity of war, and neither does Hild. Thorfinn was the only one who understood the consequences. Gudrid goes over to console Carly, saying that she's really grown up. Carly says the disease messed everything up. In addition to that, they didn't really understand the Lanu language. With this in mind, they'll do better next time. We'll do it again and again, until a land of peace is created. Until everyone understands Daddy. As long as it takes, says Carly. Gudrid says that Carly grew up a little bit too fast. Nevertheless, they'll strive to eventually establish a land of peace. Thorfinn acknowledges that the spell of war is very powerful. So powerful, in fact, that it forced Einar to kill a man, and for that, he suffered dearly. In the end, you understood me. It made me happy. See you, Einar. The end of a long journey, the dawn of a new one. Thorfinn hands Pomulk a bag of wheat. It's his way of making up for how things ended up. Now, Thorfinn wanted to teach Pomulk how to grow it properly, but given the circumstances, he really can't do that. That being said, the crop is really strong and it's going to do well on its own. Now, he wonders where Niska is, but she's gone for the moment. Thorfinn then shakes Pomulk's hand as they bid each other farewell. And in a very surprising turn of events, he also shakes hands with Puin. A man who had so much animosity towards him and the Nords has finally reconciled his differences with them. While leaving on the boat, Thorfinn notices Gyaokwi on the shore. A word of warning, throw away that sword. If you wish for the Lanu to continue living peacefully on this island for long, throw that sword into the sea. You will succumb to the violence, Gyaokwi. But the leader of the Gippi merely rises his sword into the air, intent on continuing his brutal ways. Now while at sea, Bug-Eyes proceeds to pull in a small boat. And wouldn't you know, Niska is on the boat. We've decided to live together. Sorry, but I'll be taking this boat. Call it a wedding present. Now, Bug-Eyes and Niska have decided that they can't live on the island any longer. In addition to this, they can't go back to Greenland. There are just far too many differences between the two. So they're gonna live on their own. They're gonna find their own place and create their own way of living. Everyone wishes them good luck as they take off in their own direction. The Saga of the Greenlanders. A 13th century manuscript describes 6 voyages of the Europeans to the land in North America, a land they called Vinland. Thorfinn Karlsefini's settlement project was the 5th of these, and it seems to have been the largest one. Upon making it back to his family, Thorfinn grabs his new baby boy and raises him up into the air. And after such a long journey, it's so great to see Thorfinn make it back to his family. The tears of relief in Gudrid's face are just very heartwarming and so touching. And the story ends with Pamuk planting the wheat seeds, and we see that after some time, they're starting to grow. What sprouted were prayers for the future. We must not let them die out. And with that, guys, that officially ends the story of Vinland Saga. It was a fantastic ride with many ups and downs and exciting moments, and I'm so glad that you went on the journey with me. If you guys liked this video, I would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. But if nothing else, I wish you a good day, and I'll catch you later.